to stay.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond Boards, a podcast dedicated to the actions and interests of skaters beyond skateboarding. My guest today, Indigo Willing, was born in Vietnam but grew up and spent most of her life in Sydney, Australia. She has been leading a successful academic career in sociology and has founded and developed strong communities such as the Adopted Vietnamese International Initiative or the Asian Australian Films Forum and Network. Indigo picked up a skateboard in 2014 at the age of 41 years old. Since then, aside from skating for fun, she has focused much of her work on skateboarding, whether through her research and mentoring, but also through building communities such as the We Skate QLD network, formerly known as Girls Skate Brisbane, the Consent is Rad campaign, or more recently the SSHRED Research and Community Network. In June 2023, Indigo released a new book called Skateboarding, Power and Change with co-author and skateboarding journalist Anthony Pappalardo, in which they explore how cultural, social and political change happens through a unique analysis of the ethical turn in skateboarding today. So here's my conversation with Indigo. I hope you'll enjoy it. Yeah, no, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I usually start these interviews asking my guests how he or she started skating. But in your case, since you started a bit later in life than what usually people do, which is like when they're children or teenagers, I wanted to ask you a bit about maybe your life prior to skating, because there's quite a big chunk of life before you picked up a skateboard. I know that you were born in Vietnam and that you came to Australia as a child. Can you tell me a little bit about that, about, arriving in Australia and your roots in Vietnam?
Thank you for asking me about my Vietnamese origins, I guess. I was born in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. And it was a hectic time, as a lot of the, footage from the time in Hollywood films would show. Yeah. It was chaotic. It was, often seen as a, sort of a loss of innocence in a lot of things, because it was just very violent. And, it was also like a very explosive time for rights and civil rights in, say, yep, places like America and in Australia, where I eventually ended up. So people were very politically aware and very hungry for change. Mm-hmm. And also just challenging like things that were often taken for granted or not questioned as urgently in the West. So things like empire, things like colonialism, why would we be, sort of in other conflicts when, we should be looking at matters at home. And so, anyway, I was part of an effort to play out people's conscious, is that the word? I don't know. Like, play out people's ethical response to the war, because it was so brutal, and there were a lot of images of, women and children being part of that conflict where they hadn't been before. Even though women and children were always, part of conflicts. Yeah. The difference with this war, it was very televised, and a lot of the orphans and children in orphanages struck a chord in the West. So I actually came out to be adopted by Australians in 1972, a few days before Christmas. Mm-hmm. And so I sort of literally, arrived in Australia, and then one of the first things I saw about Australia was a Christmas tree and, presents, and it was really probably very surreal for me back then. But yeah, following me, there was like a whole airlift of children to the West and to places like the UK and to France, called Operation Baby Lift. So I'm not sort of unique in this way. There's probably about 3,000 of us that were scattered after the war across Western nations. Quite a lot of children, I think, went to places like Sweden, surprisingly, and to other European countries. So you can pretty much find people that are adopted from the Vietnamese war across Western nations. So that's a bit about my childhood and my origin story about how I went from Vietnam to growing up in Australia.
And what city did you live in Australia? Did you grow up in,
So the city that I grew up in, firstly, in Australia, was Sydney. Which is Gadigal country in First Nations. So, yeah, it was pretty strange place to grow up in some ways, but also very beautiful. Very, it's a very wealthy kind of nation back then, but it wasn't very open all the time to Asian looking people. It certainly had a history of colonialism and racism towards First Nations people, and there are a lot of good people that I met and a lot of people that are very open-minded, but at the same time it was, very tense, and it was, there was a lot of challenges, including racism growing up as an adoptee.
Yeah. But and especially I guess at that time it was probably, I don't know if it was worse than today, but
Yeah, it goes in waves with, what people are angry at and what people, I think just trying to find their own voice and their own sense of power, sort of latch on to something where they can feel like they can, be stronger. And it's always liken it to the George Orwell, I think, Spook Animal Farm, where you have like animals that, one day they want to overtake the farm and you think they'll be very peaceful, but even the most peaceful animals, once they get a taste of power, begin to be, like brutal and oppressive towards it. So once people have power, basically, they may not always turn out to be the most democratic and the most gentle and kind, but definitely people that are, don't have much power, sometimes the only way to feel a sense of that is to oppress another group. So we see it across races. It's not necessarily Asians or,
And so I'm jumping a bit ahead in time, but I wanted to ask you about your getting into academia. Today you're a doctor in sociology, but I wanted to ask you about maybe like after high school, did you start studying sociology right away, or is that something that you got interested in a bit later in life? Like how did your path kind of go towards sociology?
Yeah, that's a great question about how I went from, high school into sociology. So I've always been very, very drawn to people's stories, a bit like you, and just want to, know more than what we see on the surface. And I actually I think I did a diploma of journalism when I left high school, and I did work experience at radio stations and TV places.
Nice.
And it was a lot of fun, and, you meet like a lot of eccentric sort of famous people that are very amusing and a little bit, like dysfunctional, and then it sort of strips away having that hero worship of people because you realize everybody's human and has flaws.
Sure.
And so, I went to film school actually for my uni degree.
Okay.
And my sub-major was social inquiry, which is essentially sociology. And I just found I think to be like a film director at least, you need to be quite bossy and really assertive. And I'm a bit more chill and like to, spend my time getting to know people and get comfy. And so, it wasn't for me to sort of, at that stage anyway, be in the film industry, and I wanted to be behind the screen, and so I started writing about the stories that I wanted to film in a sense. And then I began to just explore my own history a bit as well. I was just in a mental space and mature enough to begin to think about what it meant to be adopted from overseas, from a more sort of steady and confident place where I was, very scared before as a child. It wasn't, very comfortable to do so. And so for my master's degree, after I finished my film degree, I did it in looking at Vietnamese adoption for my thesis.
Okay.
And it was a chance also just to connect with people like me and not feel like, you have this uniqueness, you begin to feel a bond and a sense of community.
Yeah.
And, they've done these studies where if you have a lot of if you're marginalized in any way, or even if just general life pressures get to you, if you personalize it, you're more prone to depression and, feeling despondent and all these things. Once you see it as a community and societal issue, and possibly even see like the politics of it or just see the power relations, you're more likely to begin to feel strategically motivated to change society rather than taking it as a personal burden. So that really helped me grow, I think, doing my thesis. And then for my PhD, I decided to reverse the angle of like looking at my own population to looking at white parents' experiences of people who adopt. So it's like a two-way conversation or a two-way street, isn't it? Like you always think if there's a problem in society, let's look at the victims or the people that are marginalized. But what we need to do is also turn it around and look at the people that have the power and ask them what's going on for you, because otherwise you end up, making people into sort of parodies or stereotypes or monoliths, and you never understand them. You just judge them, which isn't helpful to anybody.
Sure.
Once you sort of break through the wall of whatever you think somebody is and what you're projecting on them, and you learn what makes them tick, sometimes, and not all the time, you can find commonalities that are a working point to bridge the differences and move forward from whatever might not be working or might need improving. So yeah, I think that's just, it sounds really sociological in a sense, because C. Wright Mills, who's a sort of, one of the, I guess, key voices or influences on sociology, made us look at society as, public issues. So not looking at things like personal troubles, but looking how they connect as public issues. So whatever you're doing, if you're homeless, or if you have like an addiction issue, or if you're, whatever it is, you can connect that back as a public issue and a societal thing that's happening, rather than taking it as a personal, trait that's, only, you can only blame the individual, because that doesn't really help anybody in the bigger term or bigger picture.
Right. Yeah. And so when did you complete your PhD? I wasn't sure when you got it done.
Neither am I. I guess life before the pandemic, Quentin, is like, oh my gosh, what happened? So it was about 2010, so maybe 13 years ago, 12 or 13 years ago that I did my PhD, yeah.
And how long did it take you to do it? I was just curious to ask, because I don't know much about doing a PhD. I don't think I would ever have enough courage or patience or stamina to do something. So it's like a huge commitment, because you work on something for so long and everything. And I talked about it with a few people that I've had the privilege of talking to for this podcast, like Sander, like Danny. I just had Ted Barrow a few weeks ago, who are all doctors like you. So yeah, I was just wondering, how long did it take you to complete it? Because I think it varies from person to person and from country to country. So
it does, and such a good question about how long it takes anybody to do a PhD or any sort of bigger work, because it does indeed require you to be quite patient, very obsessive,
yeah,
a little bit like, committed. And I actually think that skateboarders are very well suited to academia and to becoming researchers, because they are very obsessive and they're very persistent,
yes,
and they're tenacious. And, it can be quite a commitment and quite boring to learn a trick over and over and over and not leave until you've got it, or, spend years trying to learn that trick. And, that tenacity and that persistence and that, sheer willpower is perfect, really, for academia. So in Australia, it's generally around 3 to 4 years that they give you to do a PhD full time.
Okay.
And yeah, for me, in my first year, I found out I was pregnant. So I was like, ooh, okay. I wasn't expecting it, and I wasn't somebody that was always walked around thinking, I want to be a parent one day. And if anything, I thought I'd probably be a weird parent, because I lost my own parents in the war, and I just, I thought, I don't know if I can live up to whatever a parent is, in a sense, even though I have very, loving, supportive, adoptive parents. I wasn't sure what it all meant to be a parent, so I hadn't really planned on it. So my first year, I obviously took off time to have a baby, and it's actually this connects to skateboarding in a sense, because I'd gone out with a friend of mine who's an adoptee. And one of the things that I've done in my life is actually started up a network for other adoptees to all meet each other and connect.
I wanted to ask you about that, the AVI, right?
Yeah, Adopted Vietnamese International, or AVI for short. Anyway, this was a Sri Lankan adoptee, and her son skated. And I said to her, I've always wanted to skateboard. So we went shopping in a shopping mall, and we bought one of those tacky, horrible, complete boards that you get from a sports store that, are really bad. Like in America, it's probably called a Walmart board or something, but,
Right, yeah.
You know what I'm saying. So I bought this really cheap $50 board with horrible bushings that fell off, I think. And when I took it to a skate store, they said, oh, gee, that, they saw you coming, because it was such a bad setup. It was almost like sawdust when you stood on it. Anyway, so I bought this skateboard, and it was really cute. My friend's son, who was about 12 at the time, showed me like a skate video, and he's saying, oh, you've got to practice every day, and there's a proper little skate rat, sort of getting me ready to go off stair sets. And I'm thinking, I just wanted to learn to go
One
to the
step at a time,
yeah. Like, he's obviously deep in the culture, whereas I thought back then that skateboarding, it would take a bit longer to do all that. And then about a week after I bought the complete board that was pretty crap, I found out I was pregnant, so I thought, oh, okay, well, I don't think I'm going to be skating, going down stair sets anyway. So I put the crap board aside and, had a baby and, concentrated on my PhD. And anyone that's sort of, become a parent and has a newborn would know it throws your life in a bit of a spin, and it's an adjustment. So it wasn't until my son was 5 that he started school, and I thought, well, I've got a bit of time on my hands now, and I want to, do some exercise, and I'm not really a person that would go to the gym and be that disciplined. Mm-hmm. So I thought, I'll start skateboarding again, and that's how I got back into it, really. It was like a long-term dream to skateboard, but it was only until my son had started school that, it was the right time for me.
Yeah. You had a bit more time and to dedicate to starting to actually skate. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and maybe it was like a reverse sort of skate story. I found that most people were skate rats and skateboarded, and then it was time to settle down and have, adult stuff happen and get jobs and all that, whereas mine was kind of the opposite. Well, now I'm an adult, I'm going to skate. And even now, like, my partner and my son drop me off at the skate park, and they talk, because I don't drive, and so I get a lift sometimes, and they say, be safe and take care, and we'll pick you up in an hour. So it's like the reverse of the child and the parent going to the skate park.
That's amazing. So what year was that you learned that you were pregnant and that you got your first kind of interest for skateboarding? Was that like mid-2000s or late 2000s or?
Yeah, so I started around 2013 or 2014, and the reason I remember that is because it was probably around 2016 when Brian Anderson came out as gay.
I think so, yeah, maybe 2015, but yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, between 2015 and 2016 there was a real momentum for skateboarding to have, like women on the teams. I think Thrasher had Lizzie Armanto on the cover finally. Mm-hmm. She was put on Birdhouse, so, there's certainly really cool women's networks and women's magazines and women's skate companies like Mimi Noop's, Board Company and many others. But, this was a time where skateboarding was really getting shaken up, and people were saying, wake up to yourselves. It's not all just dudes that are heterosexual, that are, whatever.
White,
Yeah, like the whole thing was sort of like, okay, like, and, it was surprising. Now we would think it's surprising. Hopefully we'd think it's surprising that, people like Sam Maguire, was a photographer for skateboarding, same thing, like, being able to just be their authentic selves. And yeah, it was a good time to start skateboarding because there are all these people that were speaking out, and the women, I always say this, like, women like Alyssa Steamer, and there's like, essentially skateboarding for women and non-binary people has always, had a very strong queer presence. So it was really just for the men to realize and accept gay men that was like very pivotal to really shaking up their culture. The men's skate culture was still very heterosexual and very sort of monocultural in a sense, despite everybody, being artists and free thinking otherwise. So it was a good time to start skateboarding then. And then, of course, as we know, in 2020, there was like yet another kind of, explosion of social change. Probably something that,
after Black Lives Matter and everything.
Yeah, like the civil rights movement back in the 60s and 70s when I was born, like the anti-Vietnam War protests and the women's movement, like that momentum was, again, sort of very much present in 2020. So skateboarding again had it wasn't just nudged, it was like pushed off the cliff, like, come on, like, this is the next wave of change. And so I'm glad that I learnt to skateboard then than in the 90s when it would have been so much harder, I think.
Yeah,
I wasn't there. I can't time travel, but that's what I hear as well.
Sure, yeah. And how do you remember like these first few months or this first year of, starting to skate? How did you approach it? Like, did you watch videos, read magazines, or did you just kind of try to connect with other skaters in skate parks or with organizations where you lived? What was your first kind of steps in skateboarding?
I love your questions. They're so much on formative experiences. And I have a friend, Ben Green, Dr. Ben Green, who's at my centre, and he writes about peak experiences, but he writes it about music. So everybody has a peak musical experience. So when you're young, if you hear, I don't know, hip hop for the first time, or Jimi Hendrix, or, you know, you hear like a song that becomes your sort of personal anthem, that's like a peak music experience. And I think what we're discussing here and what skateboarders have are like peak experiences of skateboarding. So you might hear lots of songs, or you might skate here and there, but then there's usually these really pivotal moments like, okay, like, you know, this is amazing. And certainly that sort of peak experience for me was going with my friend Evie Ryder, who now she's been running a skate network with me and a group of other amazing individuals for some time now. But we went to this sort of learn to skate lessons that the council were putting on with some really cool Australians. So there was like Paddy G, and he invited people like Dennis Durand and, you know, just some really amazing people. Like you would see Tommy Flynn at the skate park, like just...
wow. Those are really good skaters.
Yeah, like you're just recruiting all like these sort of, you know, like majorly great skaters to teach you ollies, which was cool. Like I seriously think the first person to teach me the ollie was Dennis Durand.
He's a good person to learn from, for sure. Yeah.
I'm very fortunate. I revere that moment. But also learning to drop in was my peak moment.
Oh yeah.
And it was a tiniest, miniest quarter you would ever dream of. And it seems so scary, right? You're just like, I had seen people drop in vert ramps growing up when I was younger and always wanted to do that and hadn't worked out how you did it. Whereas this workshop was pretty much one of those environments where they encourage you to do it. But it wasn't one where they hold your hands. They're still like, you know, just slam it down and go for it and commit. And so I scorpioned, like the first time I did it, I just like, you know, dove into the concrete, like, you know, did the scorpion where you like just about, you know, break your rib cage and anything else. And I thought, okay, you know, and I was like to the concrete, like, F you, I've always wanted to do this. And so I got back up and, you know, did it again and again until I could do it. And, I remember people thinking, you know, like, what's wrong with that mum over there? Like, she's a bit weird, isn't she? And she's really, you know, like determined to do this. And, but I remember that was like the other parents, cause, you know, I went there with my son as well and he wasn't really into it. But, you know, the skateboarders understood, like the people that were there either instructing or just skating, they knew that because they'd all been through that themselves.
Yeah, of course.
And so they're like, you know, go you kind of thing. And they understood where other people were like, she should have gone to hospital about 3 goes before she got rolled away. That was fun, but it was also, you know, like the scene that I was in was, you know, very macho and a lot of dudes and they were very nice but it was definitely a man's-led scene. Like they sort of dictated the music and what kind of clothes were cool and there was only a few sort of women at my local and they're amazing skaters. So I don't know if you know Izzy Mutu, or she got married to Jake Duncombe, so Izzy Duncombe.
Oh, okay, yep.
Was one of the skaters there and, you know, Evie Ryder, who I, you know, skate with now and, some really amazing people from back then. It was Girls Skate Australia. So, Esther Godoy sort of, you know, was really the person that sort of started it all. But like Shanae Collins or Sheezy on Instagram, you know, she was part of that crew. And so again, we had some really amazing people to look up to skate. And, a lot of those skaters are, you know, now coaching people like Chloe Cavell and, you know, Arissa True, like they're behind the scenes, maybe working for, you know, like Skate Australia or whatever. So they're continually giving back to skateboarding. So, you know, there wasn't many, but the women that were there were very generous and just shredded. So, you know, I sort of learned to skate long before everybody wore protective stuff and were, you know, safety conscious. It was still very like, you know, sort of gnarly and just, you know, like commit and skate or die. And so,
Skate or die, I was going to say that.
Yeah. And then I would meet these lovely sort of other middle-aged mums that from California or whatever, and they had a much more women-centric culture that they had access to and much more safety conscious. And I would seem like, you know, very sort of...
punk?
Yeah, weird. Like, you know, like, let's get this, you know, really grottiest spot ever and like, let's just skate over the broken glass. And they would be like, you know, why don't you just not? So I don't know. Yeah, I think you do reflect your skate scene in a way, don't you? Like, and it's nice when you learn that there are other cultures and other skate scenes and other ways to do things, but it's very eye-opening as well.
And so I was looking at your work and what you've been doing basically, and I saw that you founded or co-founded or participated in creating many kind of initiatives and communities. You mentioned one before, the AVI, the Adoptive Vietnamese International Initiative. So that's not skate related, but it's a very important one for you especially, I guess.
Yeah.
And I saw that you also did kind of in the same realm, the Asian Australian Films Forum and Network. You started that in the early 2010s. And then related to skateboarding, I saw that you co-founded the We Skate Queensland or QLD network and also the Consent is Rad campaign. So I was just wondering if you could tell me a bit about like creating these initiatives, these campaigns, and what is maybe like the common theme in all of this. Yeah, can you take me through like some of them?
Yeah, that makes total sense to try and find a common thread between such different types of communities in some ways, but in other ways, again, it's a reflection of coming to skateboarding as an adult already with a PhD, already the PhD, to be honest, they're nothing really that grand. It just means that you're very obsessive and spend a long time doing something very boring. But what they do teach you, and maybe your other guests have already talked about that, is to look at something that's got flaws and try and understand it and hopefully change it to move forward. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really matter what the topic is of your PhD. If you're a trained sociologist, you're kind of like a trained carpenter, or you're a trained builder, or you're a trained, mechanic. Like you see the problem and it's your role, or it's your instinct and it's your training to then get to it and begin to tinker around until it's running smoothly or it's built really strongly or whatever your training is in. And so similarly with, say, when I went to university and I was exploring identity and adoption and racism and, how do you belong and why wouldn't you belong and what are the problems, that very much reflected everything I saw in skateboarding when I started to become part of the culture. Originally, when you're on the outside of skateboarding and you're just sort of learning, it's easy to romanticize it or the opposite, be very frightened of it. But once you begin to skate, you realize how much of society bleeds into or is very much interwoven with what skateboarding is, because it's made up of skateboarders who are people, right?
Yeah.
So all the prejudices, all the identities we have, all the hang-ups and biases, they're all very much part of the culture, even though it's just primarily bonding us through, like a wooden toy with wheels. Mm-hmm. We ourselves are bringing that humanness to it. So, the Adoptive Vietnamese International is very much about, just trying to connect people, think about your identity and think about whether or not you belong or not. And I've discussed this before, but I think also coming from the war and losing so much, but also not knowing what happened to people that I'm related to and other people at my orphanage, you do have a strong sense of survivor's guilt. And you don't always feel worthy of the most basic things, even it'll catch you off guard and you'll just, have a blanket to keep warm, or I don't know what it is, you just kind of think, okay, why me, and is somebody else cold or is somebody else hungry or whatever. And so you're constantly just checking yourself, am I taking up too much of more than my share in life, and what can I do to even that out and share it back, and what can I do, I guess, to balance the world in a way so that I don't have more than I deserve or something. It's very deep, and I probably need to sit down and write about it one day, but that's driven me to my community work. Mm-hmm. And also I think just I do have an adoptive family, and they're very giving and wonderful, but I am also without a family in a sense, like my Vietnamese family, and there's a lot of family that I would have had through fate and war that I don't have. So in a sense, you look past where you belong to places that you can belong. So you look towards community and you look at strangers, and those strangers could very much be your family. Mm-hmm. And they talk about, there's lots of different, refugee communities, queer communities, a whole bunch of different communities that do restructure what family and belonging are, and sort of bypass the typical, boundaries that we would construct, which are very, often very alienating. So with the Asian Australian Film Forum, that sort of came from my film degree, and just just kind of looking at all of the horrible stereotypes and racism and just silliness of how Asians were portrayed on the screen. Yeah. And again, not being raised culturally Vietnamese or particularly Asian, yet having those stereotypes piled on you, you're going to be submissive, or you're going to naturally be good at maths, or, all these really weird sort of stereotypes that people think are biological. It's like, no, they're definitely not biological. And, you just wanted to see more positive, well, I just wanted to see more positive portrayals of Asian people growing up seeing just really silly and offensive, sort of depictions via war movies. So the Asian Australian thing, it just sort of started trying to represent Asians in a more positive way and seeing which actors are doing cool stuff and highlighting that.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's just finding a place to belong, but also I guess be respected just in, for being you without having to go to great effort to explain why. Just everybody deserves, respect. And
of course.
The We Skate is pretty similar, really. It's like just saying, okay, well, here's a group that haven't, like, say, women and non-binary people, queer people. Here's like a group of people that have been on the margins of something that they're very much part of. And in fact, they've got their own thing going on. So how do you firstly connect people that might feel alone? How do you better represent people that might have, been reduced to stereotypes or objectified or made fun of? And it doesn't even, like, in the past, like, we've all done and said things that are just really cringe. So it's also just a matter of saying, well, now let's change that, because the people that, we might have been discussing are saying we don't like being talked about that way, or we don't, that's just not true of us or whatever. So just evolving with diversity in any scene.
Right.
And then the SSHRED one, again, it's just trying to make a space safe. We should all just skate. And for so many people, there's so many other things that are ticking across in their head. Safety checking, am I going to be safe? Are people talking about things that, make me feel threatened? Even the board graphics, like, are they really objecting of women and therefore I'm just going to feel really uncomfortable? And, it's in the workplace these days, you're not allowed to put, like posters of like really rude things because it's seen as sexual harassment and just really kind of gross. But boards, like board graphics, if you have those and you put them in a skate store and then a woman goes in there for the first time to learn to skate and she sees all that on the wall, like, she's going to begin to feel like, well, what's my value in this space?
Yeah. Do I belong there or,
Yeah, like, and I mean, I hate censorship in some way. So in a sense, like, everything should be like, allowed, but it's not even. Yeah, the impact and the consequences of what you do with that freedom are still very real.
Exactly.
So yeah. So, SSHRED is, but it did come from all kinds of problems in the community that don't get addressed. And it's a no naming, no shaming, no blaming campaign because, we're not an investigative service. We're not counsellors. We're not, a rape crisis centre. I wish that we had all that training and skills and time, but we don't. We're just ordinary skateboarders that want people to be respected. So we're very much concentrated on being educational and just raising awareness. So we sort of know our limitations as well. And I feel like there's a lot more services and there's a lot more initiatives that are needed in that sort of consent and sexual violence area in skateboarding that we don't address because it's simply like I said, we're just skateboarders trying to create good messages and keep skateboarding rad. And so it's sort of like a call to action. Like if you have these skills and if there's campaigns and things that you can do, we want to motivate people to do that. And we've had some amazing collaborators like Skate Like a Girl, Rolandus Menes from the Netherlands. There's a long list of collaborators from Italy as well, like Doyen. So they're in, I think, the UK end.
Okay.
There's quite an amazing Consent for Breakfast, Hero Skate. Yeah, I could list it forever of these amazing people that have collaborated and done maybe, films or just, awareness kind of campaigns that have been so reassuring. The skateboarding is moving in the right direction.
I wanted to ask you about SSHRED. I read in the book, the Skateboarding Power and Change book, at some point you mentioned that you were getting cyber harassment.
Oh my gosh, yes.
On that, and I was kind of shocked. I mean, I'm not totally surprised because I can see why it would upset some people, but was it like a very recurring phenomenon, or was it just every now and then, or like...
It's a few different things, and I think the most important thing to emphasize in this case is everyone deserves to be safe on the internet, and there are like it's easy to be, like some sort of weirdo or warrior behind a screen, and a lot of people that say ridiculous things probably wouldn't even say it one-on-one if they had a chance to get to know you and understand where you're coming from. But behind the screen, you know, there's a lot of instinctiveness and there's a lot of emotions in the community for good reasons, and there's a lot of things that, anyway, for a range of reasons, we just need to keep our staff safe, our volunteers safe, and ourselves. And yeah, so from cyber harassment, like SSHRED used to have open comments, and we've had to change that. And even on We Skate Queensland, like we posted a friend who does WCMX wheelchair skating, and he was doing an exhibition for kids, and the amount of cyber trolling that got, it was great, like in one way that it had like, I think 47,000 likes or something and 2 million views, like it went viral. Wow. But the amount of harassment that came with that towards some, you know, skaters with a disability was, you know, really disappointing. And so it's not just concern, it's I think anybody that just tries to be authentic and earnest and genuine and have some change, you know, there's going to be some backlash. And for legal reasons as well, like I just need to be very, very careful. I've had people's legal teams and threats of all sorts of things. And, you know, crazy. It's, like I said, we're a no naming, no blaming, no shaming campaign, but you do chart some very scary and weird forces not for good. We want to be a force for good. All we want to do is we say we want to just keep skating rad. So, you know, and keeping close to people that share that vision, and that's pretty normal. So, I will say, like, the sort of troublemakers and the people that are a bit stranger in the minority, thank goodness. So, yeah.
No, for sure. I remember reading that and just being like appalled, or I don't know if that's the word I'm looking for, but just just so disappointed to read that people are, you know, taking time to harass you or just say all this negative bullshit on something that is genuinely great. And I don't know why people would do that, but
I mean, I think it's, you know, again, like if you look at a lot of the women's skate groups and queer skate groups, it's no different for them. They have a lot of comments that they have to delete, and certainly from the early skateboarding, like on the, you know, like forums and slap forums, or, you know, not slap in particular, but, you know, there's definitely, if somebody would post a skate video in the past of a woman, you know, there'd be like loads of comments like, you know, go make a sandwich or get back in the kitchen, or, you know, even now when there's like maybe a skateboarder who's a woman who's wearing a bikini top and it's hot and sunny and she's just skating, and there's a lot of hate towards that, whereas, you know, you have a man that's shirtless and people just concentrate on his trick, like, that's a great trick. And it's like, well, both of them are putting their clip on Instagram, and both of them, like, in fact, you know, the woman's got more clothing than the man in this case. And so,
absolutely.
Yeah, there's still like a lot of, you know, just attitudes that continually, like, you've just got to lead by example, and you won't always get it right, but you've just got to keep going forward. And that's what we all need to do.
But that's brave of you and all the people associated in these, like in the content SSHRED and We Skate Queensland and everything. Like, it's brave for people to, you know, keep doing it, because I guess if you read like some negative comments or horrible DMs and stuff, it could make you, I guess, just doubt yourself. Like, why am I doing this to myself? Kind of, I don't need this, you know, like why would I want to read that kind of stuff?
So I think the trick with that, just because other listeners will be doing similar kind of work, or not even similar, but they will get, you know, there's always people out there that just have to be negative. So again, it's like also taking a break and having self-care time, reaching out to other people. Like, I think it's a very negative thing to go through all that alone. And fortunately, I have a team that I work with, and you know, if anyone's doing a social project alone, I think reach out and get mentors in the community. And we had a lot of help from groups like Skate Like a Girl, you know, in terms of self-care and sort of strategizing, and also, you know, just the advice of you don't have to respond to everybody. Because,
for sure.
And in fact, you know, Anthony Pappalardo, who wrote the book with me, and Adam Abada, who did the illustrations, you know, they sort of pointed out that, you know, in an age where we can access people 24 hours a day, that doesn't mean that we have to respond to them. Like, people feel like they have access, and it, you know, out of politeness, often we feel like we have to respond. But in fact, you know, if we don't feel safe, or even if we just don't have the mental energy, it's okay just to stand back.
Sure. And actually, so Constant SSHRED started at Pushing Boaders, right, in Malmö in 2019. Is that where it kind of originated?
Yeah, sort of. It actually started in my own scene, and I don't tend to talk about other people's incidents. That's sort of or other people's situations, like that's their space and their
story.
It's their experience and their story. Exactly, and it's too easy to, so especially for your viewers listening, as well, this is a very delicate topic, and there's always resources on our website for people that are, feeling anything from this kind of discussion, because it is very delicate, and it's very, it's basically very traumatic for a lot of people, and so, we're sort of navigating a topic that I don't want to spend too much time other than pointing towards. SSHRED has a lot of resources by a lot of mental health and sexual violence prevention specialists that we've collected. And part of what SSHRED does is that it has listened to the community and realised that there's these gaps of support, knowledge, not motivation, but encouragement to look at different campaigns and different ways that people are doing consent. So, the Pushing Boaders, we launched it there, and we're very fortunate to be at a conference where there are a lot of influential skateboarders that were able to, hold the sign saying SSHRED, just to sort of get up the momentum and just share that no naming, no shaming and no blaming message. And then, but I was at Malmö at Pushing Boaders to actually talk about my research on aging skateboarders and many other things as well. And it was just a great chance to learn on all aspects of skateboarding and social change. So, we can, when we get an opportunity to get together and just listen to each other and different experiences, it really is really important to then realise that your own scene is actually not the only way to do things. Or things that you think are normal and you might put up with actually might be intolerable in other scenes, and people have moved past that, or people have, encouraged change in, sort of very collaborative and gentle ways, or they've, really shook things up and, had to do some radical changes. But I think when we're all stuck in our own scenes and our own friendship groups, and this happens in skateboarding, we can get stuck. So Pushing Boaders was just an opportunity to share some of the, things that people wanted to change, and then hear about how other people had gone about that. So it was really cool. And you've spoken to some of the people from that.
Yep.
And, there should be more opportunities. And one of the things I'm trying to do with my crew we have We Skate Queensland, which is a state in Australia. We want to actually now expand that with some other people that we're collaborating with to sort of make it sort of more national, and have a We Skate Australia and have a leadership program. The leadership program, it's kind of like Pushing Boaders, and it's also kind of like a lot of the other amazing initiatives that we've seen at women's groups like the Skate Witches and Skate Like a Girl, many others, Exposure Skate, there's so many I could mention, Girl Is Not a Four-Letter World, Poseidon, there's all these amazing skate groups that are doing great things. And what we want to do is sort of create a hub where if you want to lead a project or you want to make some sort of a change, it's just providing free resources and free online lectures. So it's like a Pushing Boaders, or like a Ryan Lay did this amazing thing called Slow Impacts. It's kind of like that, but a free access, open source, look at it any time you want at your own pace kind of experience for you.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, because I've benefited, and my crew have benefited so much from, having such great people in our community to learn from. And I was so fortunate to be invited to go and share some research at Pushing Boaders, and then recently I went to San Diego, and same thing, you just sort of learn so much from meeting people that are very generous. So I just want that to continue. I don't want to hold on to that just for me, or for my crew, so yeah.
And how was that experience going to Pushing? Did you go to the first one in London, or did you just go to the second one in Malmö?
I only went to the second one in Malmö, and I would have loved to have gone to the first one in London, but I wasn't even sure if maybe I skated then, but definitely.
I think it was the year before, so you were definitely skating. It was in 2018.
Yeah, okay. So I think what happened is I came to the attention of Sandra, or maybe somebody, because I'd written this paper on tired skateboards, about aging skaters. And, sort of it had caught my attention because I'm old, and the tired skateboarding was already, back then it was mainly men in their late 30s and 40s, sort of struggling to get their skate tricks and doing slappies on curbs and, having a really fun time, and they were still loving what they did, and they didn't have to be awesome. They just had to be there, and the joy of what they were doing was, super, super cool. So I'd written a sociological study on that, thinking, why does this work? And when you look at, I looked through 1,000+ comments on Thrasher who posted the video, and most of them were positive. Okay. Because skaters can really pay each other out, and maybe that's healthy occasionally, but like this was like really positive, and I thought, okay, well, what's going on? Like, why in this fickle world of skateboarding where you can get in trouble for holding the board the wrong way or doing an illegal trick, younger skaters being so generous and finding these men endearing who are, you know, they've lost their pop maybe, they're like, you know, they're doing two stairs, like, you know, and it really was because they're doing it for the love, and you know, they're also like skaters, so the way they communicated through their music, their clothes, and their trick choices to a certain extent said, you know, we're still part of the culture, but we're evolving and we're modifying it to our age.
Right, exactly.
So that was, you know, that was why I was invited over to Malmö, was to sort of talk a bit about my research on aging skateboarders.
Okay.
And
Had you participated in similar events to Pushing Boaders, but just not skateboarding focused, like sociological conferences of some sort before that were kind of similar to what Pushing Boaders did?
Not on skateboarding, but certainly, you know, been to conferences for academic stuff. And the very, very first conference I went to, I was so lucky. Like, I got a scholarship to go and present to a Southeast Asian studies group at Yale University. And, you know, I was just studying in this small town in Brisbane in Australia where nobody knows where we are and who we are really in the international sense. Yeah. Certainly, you know, we're proud of where we are, and I'm the land of the Yugarra and Turrbal people, and it's, you know, it's a really great sort of location. But yeah, to be at the University of Queensland where I was and then sort of invited to present at Yale was like a big deal. I was like, oh, cool. And my friend presented with me, so Lin Song, and we were so nervous. It was our first conference, and everyone was really, you know, like intimidating, and I think we made it through, but our friend said that people were being nice to us at the end because they felt so sorry for us because we looked so petrified. There's like a deer in the headlights. So after that I thought I can never present worse than what that experience was like.
That was the worst case scenario right there. Yeah.
And it was such a long way to fly, like it was about, you know, like 24 hours at least to get there, and it was after, it was around, I think it was just after September 11, and the security was really tight and people were very, you know, obviously and rightfully nervous and anxious, and yeah, it was definitely a memorable experience for a conference. And after that, you know, with adoptees and stuff, I was kind of used to, you know, got a bit better presenting. And for anyone that's listening that wants to present, I got this awesome advice. Some people say, imagine people in their underwear, and that doesn't work. That makes you even more nervous. But somebody said, if anyone's vibing you out, just imagine that they're like looking in the mirror and kissing their muscles on their arms. And you'll feel better. I was like, oh, I do. Like now, like, you know, so yeah, you just have to...
That's a really good advice right there. I like it.
Because they're just flex, and, you know, so like just imagine them. And that's definitely helped. But yeah, Pushing Boaders was very encouraging.
Yeah, that's why I was asking, like, I was wondering if you had participated in similar events, just not skateboarding focused. And then all of a sudden going to Pushing Boaders, how did it feel to participate in a conference like that, dedicated to skateboarding, surrounded by skaters, people like you who do various things around skateboarding? It must have felt nice, and it must have been a different kind of atmosphere and vibe than maybe the other conferences that you had participated in.
Yeah, well, the other conferences got better than the first one, that's for sure. And like I said, everyone was very nice to us. I think, like my friend said, we just looked so petrified that they went out of their way to like calm us down. Right. And my friend was, you know, not as nervous as me. I was the one that was super nervous. Okay, so Pushing Boaders was good because it was bringing together, you know, it couldn't bring together everybody, unfortunately, but there was definitely a lot of nations that were represented, or people from, you know, Palestine, Peru, South Africa, for instance.
India.
So, yeah, like, Atida, Vagasi, and, you know, it was good because while it was supportive, there was definitely a concentration on looking at what wasn't working in skateboarding and reflecting a lot more on things that we were comfortable with, which might have been excluding others. And you know, I look at my experience then, and you think, oh, like there's all the cringe moments what I said, or you know what I thought, and that's something that you've got to have humility in these spaces. Like, you're not a perfect product and your research isn't an end destination. It has to be part of something that has to evolve, because otherwise, like in any scientific inquiry or in any discipline, if we stayed in a certain century of literature and we didn't evolve, we wouldn't have the literature we have now or the scientific discoveries. And skateboarding as an academic discipline is very much the same. Like what was okay 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, a lot of that needs to keep changing and keep evolving, and that we will make mistakes and that we will be unintentionally, but we'll certainly be excluding or, just make, very great errors through trial and error. So as long as we're just dedicated to being humble enough to try and modify or calibrate where we've gone wrong and continue to be open and just move, that's the most important thing. Because at a conference, you can be very sure of something and then somebody else will have a different opinion that surprises you and makes you change. And to me, it's no different from like a chemist or, somebody that's an astrophysicist or somebody with a great mathematical theorem saying something, and then somebody else saying, well, you didn't check this. And sometimes you have to dump that theory or dump that experiment, go back to the lab or whatever and try again. So,
right, yeah.
So I feel like, it's a bit scary still going to conferences because, you are exposing yourself to critique and, you just got to have thick skin and also have the heart to know that whatever you learn, hopefully use it for good,
Yeah, absolutely. And so I wanted to ask you, I'm changing gears a little bit, but I read this article that you published with Girl Media in late 2020. It's called Skate and Regenerate, Skaters Making a Difference to the Environment. And I was wondering, what was your take on that? Because I talked a little bit about it with Sander when I interviewed him a few months back about basically the climate crisis and how skateboarding is not addressing that topic much, at least not to my knowledge. I don't see many people talking about it on social media or in interviews or whatever, Could you tell me first of all about this article that you did for Girl Media, in which you interviewed a couple people from various areas to ask them what their recommendations to be a bit more sustainable would be, and what's your take more generally on how maybe the skateboarding industry or community could address this topic a bit more?
Wow, that's so... You've done your research. You definitely should do a PhD because you got facts and things from the archives. So the 2020 Skate and Regenerate article was talking to people like Peggy Oki, Atita Verghese, Cecilia Totticini from the Dina Navajo Nation, from Enchantment, skate shop, who's really cool, Tora Waldron and Kirby Clark from Australia, and they are doing quite amazing work as well. And particularly, I think Kirby's doing a range of initiatives around design and sustainability, and Dex for Change has always been at the forefront of that sort of social change work, and from a really sort of both a practice and research based approach. So she builds things and she does amazing work in the design field as well as with the community. Anyway, with that article, it was, again, just trying to understand things rather than just rush to labels and slogans like, yes, we all want to say save the earth or, climate change is bad, but that only gets us so far. So I wanted to have conversations or see what other collaborative spaces and projects are out there. Because, firstly, collaboration is really important because we only have certain strengths and we have a lot of weaknesses as individuals or in our own groups. And, secondly, as again, we were talking about the cultural differences that, what makes sense in your world might really not make sense elsewhere, and there's a lot you can learn.
Yeah.
So, it was trying to get as wider geographical input as my networks would allow at the time, and I was very fortunate at Pushing Boaders through somebody called Dr. Clifton Evers, who theorizes this idea of polluted leisure. He had brought together a group of people to discuss the environment and skating at Pushing Boaders, and that's where I met Atita, and I'd already known Kirby, but certainly, that conversation had started already. And also, Skatism had this article called Greening the Cube. So it was a play on the Christian Slater
movie. Yeah.
Gleaming the Cube. It was greening it. So Talia Kaufman did some amazing investigative work on different companies that were doing recycling and, just the cost of what we do on Earth. She was sort of looking at some of that. And, of course, Clifton does work on surfing, but he wanted to have this conversation with skateboarders as well. So the whole article was just kickstarting just thinking about our impact on Earth and how we can, I guess, again, like just, be more reflective and not get stuck in feeling guilty and not sort of, again, like I really hate labels. So it's like, I didn't want to sort of, just say you have to be all or nothing or, the Earth's going to end, because we can get stuck with that, right? Or if we get stuck in guilt, like guilt only gets you so far, but it's very self-serving. So we've got to like just do something and continue to do that trial and error. And so, that article kickstarted that conversation again, like it was continuing it, not kickstarting it. And then from there, there's been a lot more work that's been going on. So at the moment, Migsy from Bigfoot and a group called Skate Cycle are doing some really impressive work where they're, I think, putting together a sustainability skateboarding cooperative. Dr. Sandra Holskins is doing some really interesting project on the human impact and sort of, also like just our impact on other species. The paper that I was invited to be on with Dr. Paul O'Connor and Professor Brian Glennie and Cliff on grey spaces, again, really pushing academic theorisation and inquiries to look not just as us as skateboarders and what makes us happy, but our impact on the environments around us. So I'm just always in awe of the type of work that the academics I meet are doing, and I'm still coming to I have to learn when I meet other academics, like their language and their terminologies and their frameworks and how they're approaching the environment. And it's been a real pleasure to do some work with Brian and Paul and then Clifton, but also Dr. Ben Duester, who's a scholar from Germany who did his PhD in Queensland.
Okay.
And I think he's currently based at a German university. But we sort of got together again with more skateboarders to start the SSHRED network.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about that. Yeah.
So the SSHRED, I think I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm going to give it a shot, like what it stands for. So SSHRED is SSHRED, and it should stand for, in theory, Skateboarding, Sustainability, Health Research and Environmental Design.
Yes.
And like a play on, shredding, I guess.
Yeah, of course,
So that has, at the moment it has people that I've been involved with in the paper with Brian and Paul and Clifton and Ben, of course, Ben Duester, who has also been doing work in that area, and his work is very impressive. And hopefully, if people want to, they can go to the SSHRED website and listen to his seminar on what he calls green pressure. Or, he's taking a theory called green pressure, but he's applying it to the world of skateboarding. And, it's so fascinating. I hope people visit it because it goes beyond and pushes past the static space that greenwashing leaves us.
Okay.
Like, yes, we can say corporations are greenwashing and aren't they bad? But where do we go from there? It's like, because they have to do something and, they should do more. So the green pressure is like a much more holistic, I can't explain as well as Ben, but definitely green pressure is like after greenwashing, where do we go? Well, we put the green pressure on ourselves and so on. So it's like just a continual nudging and pushing towards, the change that we need. And then there's some other researchers, and we're hoping to invite actually a whole bunch of people, including, more women and people of colour and Indigenous sort of, academics, as well as just getting a whole bunch of people from around the world, not necessarily just stuck in Europe and the Western countries or, colonised nations, to have input in what's going on. But it is in its very early stages, and we're not going to launch it formally till next year. Okay. And it has no funding, like all good things. It needs money.
Yeah.
But it's really just to bring conversations about skateboarding and how we can be sustainable, and also how can we design everything from our wheels to skate parks to our clothing that we wear in a more sort of conscious way that's good to the environment. And again, no matter what sort of topic you would pick on skateboarding, you'd be surprised how many great minds may actually be writing research on that who are skaters, or, it just shocks me, like when somebody says, you should meet this person, they have a DIY spot and they're looking at how to have sustainable concrete, or, get rid of concrete and just skate, clay, and it doesn't last forever, but why should it? And just really innovative ways to rethink how we used to skate.
Yeah. Like
Professor Duncan McDrew, he wrote a whole paper about skating trees.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. Okay.
And the natural environment, when a tree begins to grow in a pavement and the pavement's raised and it cracks, and it also becomes a natural bank.
There's been, sorry to cut you off, but it reminds me of, I think Day One song, Skates Trees, in I don't remember which video, maybe a DVS video or something, I don't know. But anyways,
yeah. Yeah, so you've got it like the day one sort of, here's a rock and can we skate it? And,
yeah.
There's a group called, in America called Skate Wild. And, again, it's like balancing, like our enthusiasm, we have to balance, like, are we hurting the trees? And, are we being respectful to the traditional owners of the land? And, many things that we need to check ourselves. This is why we need so many people to give input on where we take skateboarding. So, it's in a good place, skateboarding, because now we're used to, as skateboarders, asking deeper questions of ourselves and just, shut up and skate. So there's almost nothing that we can't, in a sense, change because we're so persistent and, we think things through and we persist and stick with it through, like, the most ridiculous challenges. So I'm really glad that there are skateboarders, talking about the environment, and Santa is one of them, and, there are many others. I'm sorry if I haven't mentioned everybody because there's just so many of you. You're all awesome.
Yeah, we all salute your efforts, absolutely. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the book. Obviously, as I told you, unfortunately I haven't read all of it, but I was wondering if you could tell me about maybe how the idea for the book started, because I believe you met with Anthony at Pushing Boaders again in 2019, but probably you knew of his work before that. Is that kind of where this discussion about doing a book together start, or did it start a bit earlier? And what was the initial idea for this project, for this book?
Oh, it's such a great question. So I think Anthony and my memories of how we met is a little bit hazy because it was before the pandemic and before lockdowns and before so much, of the upheaval that was to follow.
Life before COVID.
And we did meet at Pushing Boaders, and I did see his talk. He was on a panel. He was one of the chairs of that panel. And it was about skate journalism, and I sort of followed his work a bit after that. I think it was after that, and he was one of the few skateboarder writers that would take on the issues that nobody else wanted to take on. So whether it was transphobia or issues about, rape culture in skateboarding, or, like whether the industry is actually progressive or it's, there are some problems that it really needs to fix because it, could be exploiting rather than elevating people. And he asked hard questions like a journalist probably, does. I'm not a journalist, but I very much respect the, lines of inquiry and how they frame things and draw out really interesting and important issues. And so I just admired his integrity because he didn't seem like he was somebody that just wanted to be popular and write about, standard things. He seemed like somebody that was just pushing himself ethically to find out more on stuff. And I think, I don't know him very well actually. We're quite different personalities, and that's a complementary energy to the book. Yeah. In a sense as well. So I like to sort of understand things deeply, but I also see the world through rose-colored glasses a lot as well because I'm an optimist. And so I liked his critical inquiry as well. Like that was just a really nice balance. And then Adam Abada I also met at Pushing Boaders, and I saw him give a talk on, I think it was like a literature night or literary readings that Carl Beachy ran.
Oh yeah.
And again, it was quite groundbreaking, like Ted Barrow, Christina Belling, and people get sort of talking and reading things that they'd, poetry or spoken word. And so Adam Abada had a piece in that, and we had sort of known each other through discussions of art, and we'd sort of toured Copenhagen together just to look at all the skate spots. And I just thought, like both of them have a deep sense of what skateboarding should be, and also they just seem very authentic people with integrity. And so, I thought, I want to do this book, and it just sort of evolved into what it is through things like, interviewing people and just doing the normal sort of sociological analysis, but also bringing all our strengths together. Because we're all very different people. Like, Anthony started skating a long time ago, and he knows the core skate culture. He's written for Gencom, and, sort of has belonged to a whole world that's, I didn't really engage with. I came through skateboarding through women's and queer skateboarding. So, like a lot of the people that I might know, like I might say to somebody that knows a lot of 90s skaters and, knows every video, but they don't know who Norma Ibarra is, or they don't know who Mabi Princess is. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like, where have you been? And
exactly.
They'll say, yeah, but you don't know Mike Carroll's third video. I'm like, well, this is because skateboarding has many cultures and
layers,
layers and differences, and and I wanted to initially write the book much more internationally, but because of COVID we kind of stuck it to the American context. Because organising like Zoom calls from Australia to Europe to the US, we would have to meet people at 3 a.m. One of us would be. But with America, with at least I think the Pacific time, we would still at least be awake in our respective parts of the world. So I think 8:30 in the morning my time, it was like 3:30 in the afternoon in America on the West Coast, and 6 dinner time on the East Coast. So it worked out vaguely, and we couldn't travel because we'd gone into lockdown in Australia. Right. No planes, nobody visits us by accident. So we were pretty much isolated for a very long time, for about a year. Yeah. And even when the borders opened elsewhere, like they were still very strict where I was from in Queensland, like had the strictest things. So yeah, we we agreed to sort of write a book, and then I was going to come to America and obviously do some field work, and we got stuck on Zoom doing the interviews, and we detail this in the book. So again, I think what's important lesson from this is that with very little money you can communicate and gather data and do books with people across the world. So it's not ideal, but it's not a barrier to people that want to write and interview somebody from somewhere else like we are now. So that's one of the sort of mixed blessings of COVID, I guess, is that we learnt that you can overcome boundaries and...
Sure.
Yeah,
obstacles.
So we just sort of... Yeah, we just sort of started writing about, some of the people we met at Pushing Boaders, but then it became focused on America, and through SSHRED and a few other things, there were just a whole bunch of people I felt like their stories were just awesome, and so it would be great to put that in the book, because, a lot of the stories aren't the ones that make it in Thrasher, or they aren't the ones that, if just a man writes a book, even when a man researcher writes about skateboarding, if you look at his citation list, it will mostly be men, and there's enough sort of women academics now that you'd have like a few citations, but I think just having a woman and a person of colour and a refugee like myself in that space, and just having us on the shelves like Danny Abuawa as well, like and from like for women like Dr. Esther Sayers, there's sort of a whole bunch of people that aren't necessarily always in that conversation and yet bring really good insights from what it's like to be on the margins and how to navigate that change. And that's what the book's about. It just interviews 42 change makers about how they did social change. And yeah, we're just so lucky to talk to, like people that are often, not necessarily the first is being a good thing. Like you don't want to be the first and the last, but definitely people that have pushed forward and broken ceilings in skateboarding to be, like a black-owned women's skateboarding company. Those sorts of things are definitely belonging, like with Apache Skateboards, the First Nations native skateboarding company with Douglas Miles Jr. and Douglas Miles Sr. Like the work they've done for the past 20 years is really groundbreaking and really necessary, not just for native people, but for people of colour and for a whole bunch of people that are marginalised. Like such amazing insights were shared. And again, like, a lot of the mainstream texts overlook these voices and our voices. So, it was an exercise, and also like, well, we could have written about, very famous people like, Tony Hawk, and we do have a few Skateboarding Hall of Fame inductees in the book, but mostly
Tommy Guerrero and...
But mostly it's people that, are behind the scenes making these amazing changes in the media or skate companies or wherever. Sort of making sure they're in the history books too.
So as you said, you decided to select 42 different people to interview. So you did all of these interviews over Zoom calls, I guess, between 2020 and 2022. That's pretty much the time during which you wrote the book, right?
Yeah, over the pandemic. So, yeah, they're all done via Zoom, but there are people that we had, most of the people we'd met in person. Some of them we've only met, online, but definitely, they're done as a typical, what's called a semi-structured interview with open-ended questions. So, people could talk about issues that they might have wanted to talk about that we hadn't thought of as well.
Okay.
So, yeah, the idea with the semi-structured interview anyway is just to sort of steer the conversation so it doesn't go too off track, but also if people have an insight or something that they want to share that you hadn't thought of, there's room for that to grow in the conversation and come to light. And each interview was about an hour each, and like I said, different time zones. So it'd either be my night or their morning. And, you know, it looks alarming, I think, like at night, if you're like sitting there with a glass of wine and it's their breakfast time, they're like, wow, you know, well, they're relaxed in Australia, aren't they? Or the other way around. And I think, ooh, like if somebody had a swig of beer and it was only 6 a.m., I'm thinking they need relaxation early or whatever. And so it was a bit strange that way. And, you know, culturally, Australians are different from the United States as well. So just trying to get used to some of the terminology and the lingo and just, cultural differences as well was an interesting one, and having like sensitivity reading when we could as well. So and we forget that, like in colonized nations especially, like it's easy to think that just because you all speak maybe English as the dominant language or something, that, you know, you would culturally be so similar, but there's so many differences, even in terms of like, you know, the word and the terminology and identity of being black in Australia is very different to what it means in the United States. Like here it's Indigenous people are black. And then we have black Africans, but, you know, in America, there's like, you know, definitely a very different important history to understand. So it was, it's not a work that encompasses everything, and there's room in that book to grow and to have more voices. And, you know, like, you know, we had to stop at 42. There wasn't time to do everybody, but there were so many more people we could have interviewed, and
but it's already a lot. I mean, 42 people is a lot of interviews, a lot of research work, and extracting all the data, and it must be a lot of work. And I was wondering actually, how did you work on this with Anthony once you had decided what the book was going to be about, and that you had decided to go on this format of interview and prepared a list of people to interview and everything? How did you share the workload afterwards? Like, how did you decide, okay, Indigo, you take care of this, Anthony, you take care of this, and maybe we'll get together on Zoom calls to decide on this specific thing later on? Or how did you do this? Because as you said, you were, like, he was on the east coast of the US, you were in Australia, so it must have been quite a challenge in itself also to do this from a distance.
Yeah, it was just a sort of a learning and a growing process, because we're from different sort of writing backgrounds as well. So I would approach things sociologically, and he would approach them from his experience as like a novelist and also a journalist. So our publisher was an academic publisher, so we did have like a format that we did need to
conform to, or
sort of rein in our ideas, because you can sort of write in many different styles and formats. So a lot of the sociological analysis in the book obviously is informed from some of the sociological theories that seem to fit best. And then a lot of the sort of skate history and the understanding of skateboarding culture is, coming from that long tradition of, essays that you would read in Genkum and Quarter Snacks now. Like, there's a whole bunch of skate writing that goes deep. So it's, it's not all just advertising, or it's not all just, hijinks. There's some of my absolute favorite writers happen to be skateboarders. It's not because they're skateboarders they're my favorite writers, but literally the writing of some of the skateboarders that is out there is, Pulitzer Prize level. It's just, blows me away, when I get time to read a lot of it. And, of course you've got like people like Carl Beachy, who are English professor, so that makes sense. But people like Jose Vardy, like, I'm such a fan of his beautiful writing. And, you have so many, like Cole Noeki, I think, is coming out with a book. And they're just very, very witty, precise sort of jokes. Like, they're just so cutting and so amazingly satirical, and you'll be on the floor laughing 1 minute and then you have this major social realization. So what we do is we look at and are inspired by a lot of that culture of writing and describing what's going on in skateboarding that balances academic language with journalistic language. So, we sort of owe a lot to people like Professor Ian Bourdain, who wrote Skating in the City, but also, following a lot of the other skate writers. Becky Beale wrote quite a lot, and, there's a whole sort of long list. Professor Schneider, I think, my pronunciations of like a lot of people's surnames, I'm sorry if I get them wrong as well. With my Australian accent, just makes every person's name sound different to what it should sound like often. But so we mention a lot of skate writers, probably about 30 skate writers at least are listed in one section, and we list all the skateboarding academics that we knew of at the time that were emerging, and there's been many to follow. And from that basis, it was more like, how do we showcase the information from the interviews and balance that with the kind of language that would be in between journalism and academic writing. And yeah, to do that, it was, you know, just like everybody else that collaborates on something, we had like live files, like Google or whatever, you know, it could be in OneDrive or whatever you use. I don't want to be an advertisement for software, but we worked on live documents. And yeah, I mean, in some ways the writing wrote itself because we had such amazing interviewees. And on top of that, I think just a lot of Zoom calls. There was so many Zoom calls, and I don't think anybody on earth likes too many Zoom calls. So it's a remarkable testament. Again, the skateboarding tenacity.
Yeah.
And, you know, same with Adam. Like, Adam visualized what our kind of themes for the book by reading, you know, excerpts, and, you know, we had, again, like Zoom calls, and he would send pictures and we'd say, well, you know, this one, you know, speaks to it, and, you know, maybe not this one, but, you know, we can begin to evolve that idea later. And, I mean, Adam was just really visualized a lot of what the book was about so well. And he's a writer as well. Like, he's written some really lovely essays for Quarter Snacks, I think, and this is Adam, and he did that, I think, a sort of like a historical essay around the Twin Towers in skateboarding that Quarter Snacks shared very recently on September 11. So,
oh, I haven't seen that one. Okay.
Yeah, check it out, everybody. And yeah, I mean, that's how I sort of, you know, I sort of met Adam really as well. Like, he was giving a spoken word thing at Carl Beachy's skateboarding readings event at Pushing Boaders. So I kind of knew Adam as an artist and a writer. And yeah, it was a lot of sort of generosity, I think, as well, because we're all very different people with different experiences of skateboarding. So you sort of needed a lot of generosity and faith in each other, that the book, you know, the stories were just paying respect to the people that spoke to us. And I needed some context occasionally, like a lot of the humour from the 90s skating is offensive now, and you think, what the hell are they thinking? And then, you know, they say, oh, it was satirical, it wasn't serious. And they're saying, not that it's, you know, that's great, but like, you know, for the time, this was, you know, meant to be a joke. And you can go, okay, like, if you know that, then it makes more sense. Like, if something's just being provocative for the sake of being provocative at a time when things were very conservative under Reaganism, for example, in the 80s, or whatever was going on in the United, because I'm not American either, so I needed some, you know, real background as to, you know, like various sort of, like the militarization of the police force, for instance, and all sorts of things that were coming through as discussions of Black Lives Matter. Like, you know, clearly it was good to not just speak to the interviewees, but also have that reflection with my co-writer and the illustrator. You know, like how to put that in your framing, and then hopefully as a reciprocal experience, like, they've been men in skateboarding, so their experiences have had a bit more of a normative experience, I guess. Being a man is normative in skateboarding, for instance, and they've grown up seeing themselves as the main feature in skate mags and all of that, whereas, you know, as a woman skater, you know, you sort of celebrate seeing a woman in Thrasher magazine every 10 years or something, and they're improving all the time, but, you know, so, yeah, some things, you know, I would sort of check and say, you know, well, you know, I think this person needs inclusion, or, you know, that story is actually really important because it shows other women it's okay just to be in that space and not be embarrassed. And you can't know that if you've not had that lived experience. So, yeah, some of the choices we just had to draw on our own lived experiences, and also give each other the grace and faith of what we're choosing. And then having people also just, read sections as well was really helpful.
And so what would you say is maybe one of the, something that you learned through doing this book and finishing it and publishing it and having people, you know, providing you feedback on it and everything? Like, what's one thing that has come up as an interesting learning, basically, discovery that you didn't know before doing this book, basically?
No, it's such a good question, and hopefully people will be able to take this up with Anthony Pappalardo and with Adam Abada as well, because, you know, it's a joint project of discovery, and like I said, they as men and with their own lived experiences and things that are different to me as well will have different reactions of what they took away from doing that big project. And I think what was useful for me, at least, was concentrating on how the sociological theories could translate to tools that are some sort of you know, mental toolbox that we can use as skateboarders on the ground. So a couple of that, and the best sociological theories should just seem like common sense at the end of the day, but they had to be brought to tension with a highlighter pen. And one of those was the idea of empathy between skateboarders and how we can build on that. So when we go to a skate park, even without talking to each other, we have to learn each other's lines or we will crash into each other.
Yeah.
And we do that. Like, I can spend an hour in a skate park not talking to some other dude across the park. And generally I know his line. We'll both know if we're being rude and breaking etiquette by not giving somebody a chance on the ledge or whatever, or, you know, if somebody looks like they've had a really hard day, you kind of let them have more space because you know they've got to blow some steam, and there's a whole bunch of unspoken empathy that goes on. And then if somebody can't get a trick, you feel that, like, oh, you know, that sucks, man. Or like, if they get a trick, this is why we get so excited. Like, if somebody drops in the first time or lands a switch tray over, you know, something difficult and they've been battling, like, we know that feeling. We can empathize, and their joy is almost the same as ours for them, or the other way around.
Yeah.
So empathy was really important because as skateboarders, there's so many different people with so many different lives and things that they need done and they want. But that empathy is our strength. That's our superpower as skateboarders. We already know instinctively every time we skate, whether it's a street spot or a skate park, how to empathize with each other.
Yeah.
The second thing that I thought might be useful that we just were able to, I guess, work on was the idea of power is that something that you have to share. If you give power, it defeats the purpose because somebody then is more powerful to the other and it becomes sort of patronizing, you know, benevolent kind of act of which people get scraps of power and then you're still in charge handing it out like Santa Claus or something. Where it shouldn't be that way, right? We should both be surrendering something when you share it, and then it's going to lead to somewhere more equitable. So, you know, it's like if you're skating and somebody has some wax or something, you know, like, is it their wax or is it everybody's wax? So, you know, it's like just sort of sharing stuff. Like, we know how to share stuff anyway. Or we have to share a spot or it just won't work. Like, nobody owns the quarter.
Yeah.
And that's slightly different from, like, you know, like with, you know, surfing, and then there's other things where you can't share a wave and you have to be a bit more aggressive. But at least with skateboarding, the terrain's generally the same, that we can all take our turn. And that's the same with society as well. So, you know, if we really learnt to share things, that would get rid of a lot of nationalism and racism at the extreme ends and, you know, all sorts of things. Like, this is our space. It's like, no, it's everybody's space and we all just have to adjust.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was also, I think, one of the things in the book that we discovered is that the real change makers don't want to be kings or, you know, they don't want to be at the top of the pile and make everybody else have scraps. Like, for women skateboarders, they don't want women to have power and then, you know, for, you know, everybody else to have to, you know, suffer the way that they did. They just want to go out and skate like everybody else. So that sort of, it's not about being the most powerful. It's like, what are you going to do with power and how do you share it in a way that everybody just gets to skate and have fun?
Benefits from it, yeah.
Yeah. So there's really like community-driven kind of philosophy, I guess, that intrigued me of all these change makers, and sort of like a selflessness. So, you know, like for the men allies that probably, you know, they're not as marginalized, but they do a lot of social change work. Like, you know, for them it was more like they were shocked that people don't get to enjoy skateboarding the way they did. So they'll do everything in their power to make sure that you can just rock up and have the same skating experience. So, yeah. That's what I struck me as a book, is like, that's the key for us all, just to get on without, you know, anybody being more special or superior to each other or whatever. Yeah, I look forward to reading the rest of it. As I told you, I wanted to finish it before today, but I just ran out of time and I read about a third of it, but I'm looking forward to the rest of it. So, yeah, I'll let you know my thoughts after I finish it. Yeah, I think it's chapter 5 where all the, you know, like people talk about the actual change making. So the first chapter is the intro, and that's where we talk about, you know, all the amazing people that are doing work that we're part of or building up from. So it's not like we're the first person to have a, you know, amazing idea. It's like we're part of a intellectual, thought-driven community that we're just building on. And then the second chapter is the history of skateboarding in a snapshot. So it's not like exhaustive, but it's certainly just saying, well, you know, here's some of the things that why skateboarding might have not been as inclusive as it's always hoped for. And then chapter 3 is like a bit of a background on all the skateboarders, like their own journeys.
I just finished that one, yeah.
Yeah, it really helps you understand why, you know, somebody like a pro skater like Ryan Lay is so dedicated to, you know, social change and his experiences and what's shaped him, for instance, to, you know, some of the women that are just so successful and they could just be sitting around being lazy and enjoying their awesomeness, but they're just giving so much back. Yeah. And then you realize that it was actually hard for them. Like, they make skating look easy, but they had to work very hard for, you know, being able to reach their potential because of all sorts of barriers. So that's cool. And then, yeah, from chapter 4 onwards, it's just looking at how they've made the changes, and it's just cool and sort of having time with all these amazing people as well, like that have pushed, you know, like for the first, you know, sort of black run skate network that has a huge shoe deal, for instance, that's going to shake up the industry, or, you know, there's just so many different types of you know, levels of skateboarding as well. Like we talked to, you know, Olympians, what that means for them when, you know, there's a lot to understand about what does it mean for skateboarding for people that have never been showered in sponsorships and, you know, money and everything. Like, the Olympics would be very different from people that have always had, you know, massive sponsorship. And so, you know, we need to understand it from all angles. And yeah, it's great to have had that generosity from all the people that said yes to being part of the book.
And so, I don't remember where I saw this, maybe on Instagram, maybe on LinkedIn, but that you, I don't know if you already moved back to Sydney or you were in the process of moving back, because you were in Brisbane for a while.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, like, if you could tell us about moving back to Sydney, because I think you're going towards a fellowship program I saw called Skate, Create, Educate, and Regenerate, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So much excitement ahead, and thank you for asking about the future. It's not too far away, 2024. It seemed like a while away, and now the end of the year is just dissolving. And it's amazing how time flies sometimes. But I am based in Brisbane, and I've been here for a long time, so about 19 years, but I did grow up in Sydney, and I'm going to go back in 2024 for a few projects. So one is I have a visiting fellowship with the Sydney Social Science and Humanities Advanced Research Centre. And what they do is they're very blue skies thinking, and they look at a researcher's project and they say, if you can do something really like some sort of landmark, amazing sort of, you know, groundbreaking project, we'll back you. And that's a dream for a researcher, is for somebody to say, you think of something that hasn't been done before and go for it. It's like, oh my gosh, okay. And so I'm just absolutely thrilled to have an opportunity to work with a couple of researchers. So Dr. Sani Mestrom does this project called Art, Play, Risk, that looks at how play and risk are good for children, and that should be part of our cities in the urban environment. So she's not anti-playground, but she's more like, let's get children out of the playground and into the cities and make cities more usable and playful. And so we have a real affinity as skateboarders with what she's doing, and she's an artist, so she does these amazing sculptures that children design and she makes them realities.
Okay.
So the sculptures that you can play on, and the skateboarders, if we said to skateboarders, dream a sculpture that you would like to skate, and then let's convince cities that should be part of the, you know, general experience. And it's sort of, again, very similar to the work of Alexis Sablone and quite a few skaters that, you know, from the sort of European countries like Copenhagen and Malmö and France. But so I'm working with her on her sort of expanding her project knowledge over to skateboarding with this idea of risk is healthy and play is important for the city, and that skateboarders can be part of that, and that sculpture can be part of that. And then the other academic as part of my Skate, Create, Educate and Regenerate project is Professor Leanne Loki. Her research concentrates on the idea of playful cities. So again, like, not seeing cities just as a singular purpose for business and commerce and all that, but also seeing urban play as an essential part of a healthy society. And again, she did a sort of a mixed event at a skate park that combined art and dancing and skating, and really just, again, trying to push it out of that monocultural idea of, well, this is what a skate park should be. To saying, well, no, like, what if we just wanted to, you know, use laser lights and experiment around and, like, change it every now and then to, you know, coexist with something else that, you know, is very interesting. So I'm really lucky to bring some of the skateboarding knowledge, and certainly that from the SSHRED project about sustainability, to a sort of a world-leading university at the University of Sydney. And I get to have access also to their design departments and to their scientists. Mm-hmm. And so pretty much any faculty that I feel like I would want to make connections with, whether it's, virtual reality or nanotechnology or, like gaming, and to say this is what skateboarders, really keen on through doing interviews with them, and then seeing how the researchers can bring that to life or pilot it. And so that's something that I'm doing next year. And I'm also part of what's called there's like a Hunter Science Institute of Sexuality Studies, and I'm part of the faculty there as well. So we're going to do like a queer-led skate program, which, there's various things that they look at, like maths and science and literature, and through a lens of where queerness is normative. And for skateboarding, part of my project will be working with Dr. Victoria Rawlings on the idea of changing the lens of consent. Well, not changing it, but expanding it, because a lot of consent campaigns are very sort of based on men's violence towards women in heterosexual situations. Mm-hmm. And it's like looking at queer frameworks and queer ways of communicating consent and bringing that into the skate culture as well. So, and learning from that, letting it lead, as well.
Okay.
Because I think we, for a long time, like how skateboarding is even now, we kind of think of only one particular gender as, the blueprint of skateboarding, and everybody else is, doing it new or bringing it fresh, where it's actually, everybody coexists. And so it's really just pushing the dominance aside and saying, okay, like, what if we all have, equal kind of, say in what we're designing, and what would that look like, whether it's a consent campaign or architecture, and then everybody wins in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just, more collaborative work.
Yeah, looks like it. Yeah, you have a busy schedule ahead of you.
Yeah, I hope people come and visit me in Sydney, because there'll be like a public event for both of them. There'll be around Mardi Gras, there'll be a queer-led skate demo, and it will have roller skaters and a half pipe, and, people will be able to come and make, sort of consent postcards with us. And,
awesome.
It's going to be fun around Mardi Gras and queer representation. And then...
When is Mardi Gras in Australia?
February and March. So the end of February and beginning of March.
Okay.
And then as part of my fellowship as well at the University of Sydney, I'll be doing a symposium or a mini conference on skateboarding design, sustainability, and I'll, sort of advertise it a lot more in advance. But this idea of playful cities, and again, just inviting skateboarders from around the world to, give a seminar and share their ideas. So we can, learn a lot from each other.
And so are you already in Sydney right now, or are you still in Brisbane?
I'm moving between Sydney and Brisbane because I'm working on a few projects. So I'm part of Griffith University. So I'm an adjunct research fellow at Griffith Uni, and they've been very supportive of all my skate research, and that's where I wrote the book Skateboarding, Power and Change with Anthony Pappalardo and Adam Abada. Mm-hmm. And then the visiting fellowship in Sydney's not next year, but currently I'm also working on 2 projects with the School of Public Health at the University of Sydney. So one of those projects has been for the Her Sport, Her Way project, which is getting more involvement from girls and women in sport, and it's been based on qualitative research with CEOs of sporting organisations. So not just skateboarding, but also, basketball, rugby, soccer.
Cool.
And then the other project is a disability inclusion project. So it's talking to teenagers with a disability and what kind of designs and games that they like playing, and what are some of the ways that, people can change the designs or change the staffing or whatever to, make it more fun and inclusive. So
yes.
Yeah, so I'm just working on those. At Sociology, you get to work on a lot of cool projects with, type of skills that you have.
So you're gonna be like working between both cities? Because I had understood, maybe I'm mistaken, but that you were gonna move back to Sydney.
Yeah, I'm gonna be in Sydney all next year in 2024, and I'll be back in Sydney for myself just in November for Dr. Sunny Mestrom's Symposium of Art, Play, Risk, and also for the Sociological Association's annual conference, talking to researchers, and I want to talk to a lot of scientists as well as social scientists around the science of sustainability and skateboarding. So yeah.
Okay.
I'm sort of there every second month in Sydney, and then a more permanent move in 2024 if people want to come and hang with me.
Yeah. I usually end up this portion of the interview with the same question with every guest, and that's basically what's the most valuable lesson that you feel you've learned from skating. And of course, it's everything around skating, not just the act of skating, but everything you've been doing around it. So yeah, is there something that comes to mind as a valuable kind of life lesson?
Oh my gosh. It's such an amazing question, and I'm just thinking there's so many life lessons that I have from skateboarding that guide me through everything else. And definitely one of those things is the that peak moment that I talked about before, when you first learn to drop in or do something that you thought was impossible, and you realize you made it possible. So again, I think that's a good philosophy for most things in life. Like, okay, like you can't even begin to have the right instincts to know how to ollie or know how to drop in if you don't practice, because our human bodies are like, maybe we learn to somersault and all sorts of other things from evolutionary processes, but there's nothing that has ever in evolution put us on wheels. That's something we have to learn.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could take an Olympic athlete good at anything else and then say do a kickflip, and they have to practice, right? But
exactly.
We make it possible. So those peak moments of realizing, oh, you know, like I can actually do something that would have been impossible had firstly somebody not told me I could do it and sort of given me some instructions, but also just through my own persistence and faith and just taking that risk and sticking with it.
So let's see. I have quite a few friends' questions, so I'll have you listen to this first one.
Hi Indigo, this is Ian Borden. Question for you. We both write books, we write history, theory, academic writing on skateboarding. How do you keep your academic work in relation to your personal skateboarding? What's the relationship between those? When you skate, do you think about your academic work, or do you try and keep them completely separate? What's that relationship like for you?
Oh my gosh, Professor Borden, the man, the myth and the legend.
Yeah. Such
an inspiring icon of skateboarding academia, and such a generous sort of mentor to the masses. So I'm loving the question, because it's kind of important in academia to have a bit of a separation from work and play.
Yeah.
But with skateboarding, our play is also our work. So they become very blurred. And I think definitely when I'm skateboarding, I can be a complete doofus. And I actually meet people and they just think there's not much, like Indy's very, very silly and giggly, and, they get a bit of a shock when they realize I've been to uni. And I don't blame them, because, I think we should just have fun and be joyful and not be serious all the time. And that's what skateboarding's all about. The only reason, main reason that a lot of us became academics and write books like Skateboarding Power and Change, for instance, is that we can't just go to the skate park always and just have fun and have joy, because somebody will, call us a name, or the skate park will be in an area where it's not always great and there's not great lighting and they need to think about the design, or, the magazines have just never been challenged to, have pictures of people that look like yourself, and, you begin to feel like, do I belong in this culture? So you want to change that? So you kind of separate the kind of work, at least that I do, looking at social change from skateboarding, because it's a lived experience and everything. But at the same time, it's good just to also just remember why you're there and what it's all about. And it's definitely having fun and having a laugh with your friends, and just also that thing of just, pushing through and discovering that you can do something you didn't believe or didn't know you could do as well. So that separation's very hard. I don't think it always happens, but remembering that fun is the most important thing definitely is a good way to balance it all out.
Okay, I'll have you listen to this other one. Let's see.
What's up, Beyond Boards Nation? This is Kristen, and I'm here to ask my friend Dr. Indigo Willing a very important question. Indy, what is your favorite Instagram page for cute animal videos, and what animal do you think produces the cutest animal videos? All right, good luck with that one. Until next time, peace.
Oh my gosh, it's all the major, iconic, most awesome mentors in the skateboarding community asking questions. Kristen Belling is such a change maker, and we could have written a whole book just dedicated to Kristen Belling and what she does behind the scenes, and she doesn't do it for attention or to be thanked or anything. She just gets down to business and just wants everybody to have a red time skateboarding, and yet has done such amazing projects, like some of the most biggest key changes. People like Kristen are, definitely steering that. So also Kristen has been an amazing mentor for reminding a lot of us to have time out and for self-care. And to also, again, like, you don't have to respond to everybody. If everybody wants your attention, you do deserve to have boundaries and to look after your own mental health. So Cute Animals has been one way that I do that. And my favourite Instagram for cute animals, you know, I look at the Explore page a lot, and it changes which animal I'm kind of most into at the moment.
Obsessed
so it could be, it could be bunnies, it could be kittens, it could be puppy dogs, or cats. I'm such a big fan of looking at cats in general. I love dogs, but I'm definitely a cat person at the end of the day. So one of my favourite things to watch are cats in Turkey. So in Turkish culture, cats are very well respected, and you often see videos of them, you know, in shops, on, like, you know, in the subway, just on those machines where you do your ticket. You know, they're sitting on the ticket machine and people have to walk past and pat them, and basically cats sitting anywhere they want. Yeah, so I encourage anyone to look up, like, you know, how cats in Turkish society are treated, and they're really just coexisting with humans in a very equal way, if not cats are the superior presence.
I had never heard that. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I think there's somebody suggested a film, and a lot of the time in Instagram especially, I probably have about 20 skateboarders that send me pictures of their pet cats and updates how their cats are going. So, you know, people that are podcasters, people that are academics, people that run skate companies, skate filmers, skate authors, pro skaters. Like, I have a whole bunch of people there.
Sending you their cat pictures.
Well,
that's amazing.
I've been interested, right? Like, I'm a sociologist that studies people, but I definitely like cats. And maybe, like, you know, I'll see a picture of their cat on their gram and I'll say, I got to know your cat. Like, it's so awesome. Or when I went to America, like, you know, I got to meet people's cats. You know, like, I like updates, like, you know, are they still getting their favorite snack, or are they, you know, still like playing out with the daisies? Like, you know, that was real cute. And yeah, so I have, like a cat report as opposed to the skate report. So thank you for that question, Kristen, and I just adore the cats. And the other animal that I'm super, always my go-to is baby penguins. The fluffy ones, they're just so cute. Look at a baby penguin. If you're having a hard day, you'll just get him.
It will turn your day around.
Fluffiness. Or? It will, or, you know, maybe not. But they've actually done sociological studies of cuteness, and it can go either way, actually. So in some of the studies, they said that looking at a cute animal has the same effect as having a cup of coffee or taking like some sort of drug that makes you high.
Wow,
like the kind of the neurological response. And the other is that they gave people those stress balls to hold that measured them, and when they saw something cute, they would squeeze the stress ball really hard. So it's almost like you're a bit aggressive when you see something cute, like, oh, I'm just going to squashy hug that. So it's the kind of sociological study I want to get funded to do. So if anyone's out there that wants to fund somebody, I'm your person.
Like fluffy penguins and skateboarding academic work.
Yeah, that's right. Or just actually my ideal next book would be like a coffee table of skaters' cats.
I could see that happening. Like I would buy a book like that. That would be really funny. Yeah.
All right. So if you're a publisher out there, you know who to go to for this next book.
Okay, let's do this one.
Hey Indy, hope you're doing good. I'm going to be stoked to listen to this episode with you chatting with Quentin. I've got 2 questions for you. We last hung out together in San Diego, where we're all living in the same skate house, an academic skate house. I'd like you to tell the listeners a little bit about your experience there. What was it like? What were the talks like? What was the skating like? My second question is about books. You've just published your recent book, Skateboarding, Power and Change. If you had the time and the money to spend a year doing nothing else but writing again, what would your next book be? Your dream book? Okay, take care. Cheers.
Right. Well, Dr. Paul O'Connor.
Yes.
Again, like such a amazingly generous academic who has mentored many people and just given up so much time for no, you know, glory or anything like that. Like academics don't get paid much anyway, but like he really goes out of his way to help any upcoming scholar find their voice and believe in their project. So a huge shout out just to the great person that Dr. O'Connor is. And My dream book, I think we have already discussed, but I'll repeat it again for you, Paul, is a book about skaters' cats. Maybe I'll get paid to come out to visit people's cats and take photos of skaters with their cats and ask, about their snacks and what their habits and their napping's like, and do they like sitting in boxes or do they like cuddly toys? And, I wouldn't mind like having an Instagram page actually with like skaters and their cats. So I see like a whole franchise happening right now. And a board series, and just endless. But so second to the book about skate cats, I do want to, I've got a project that I'm starting up, and I'm not sure if it's just going to be like an Instagram page or a new book called Do a Flip Switch. So you know how you flip the script, but like it's like people yelling out, do a kick flip.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah. So it's like, do a script flip sort of thing. So that was inspired by one of my Australian friends, Darren Caney. He's a pro skater from Mona Vale, where I grew up when I was younger. And anyway, I was just saying, I just wanted to have something that sounded fun, but it was about turning your life around and something pivotal, like that big moment again that happened to you that made you change things. And so doing this script flip, like flipping the script, but for skateboarders. So it could be as lighthearted as, you just realised that you didn't want to be an accountant and one day you just wanted to be a skateboarder and you packed up your books and threw them in the bin and said ciao and just went off to the skate park. Or it could be like something like, you survived cancer and you had, like a really pivotal experience that led to some sort of, major change that you did. Skateboarders in particular, like they have a lot of, not a lot, but there's definitely instances of skateboarders going through all kinds of hardships, and for skateboarding to, be like the avenue for them to realize that, they could change their lives somehow. So that's something that I've been thinking about, and just like maybe doing it in different scenes around the world as well. So pockets of like areas, like understanding the area people are from and the context where they're from, as well as their stories. So for instance, like I've interviewed a whole bunch of Vietnamese skaters. How they change their lives is going to be different to a whole bunch of people in Fiji or Peru or something. So maybe splitting it up geographically as well as just with different stories about how people turn their lives around who are skateboarders. So that's my other one. And then oh my gosh, the skateboarding house, which was in San Diego. Oh my gosh.
When was that? Was that in the spring or in, I don't remember when this event
happened. April.
April, okay.
Yeah, it was a skateboarding conference, and the academic world is a harsh and brutal one, and I'd had some casual work lined up to teach, and then that, because of like the COVID numbers being, student numbers being down, they cancelled one of my classes, and I couldn't actually afford to go anymore. I'd sort of arranged to pay honorariums and the registration for a women's and non-binary panel.
Okay. And
all the savings that I thought I had sort of, disappeared. And so I've never done a GoFund or anything before, but I just sort of put out on Skate Twitter, if you're a billionaire, like this is my PayPal, like, can you just help me get over to San Diego? So firstly I can meet Anthony, because I hadn't seen Anthony Pappalardo since Malmö. Right. And, do some panels and do some events around the stuff that I believe in, because, the economy sucks, and my casual work got cancelled, and people were just so generous, and skateboarders, adoptees, people that are from the Asian diaspora, and just friends or other academics all pitched in and helped me get money to be in the United States, and also pay the women and non-binary panelists, and they're women of colour, they're native women, they're like queer women, people that don't normally occupy spaces like panels and stuff at academic conferences. They're not always given the platform. It was just a collective kind of way to make this happen, and just pay the basics. It's not like everybody walked off with a huge speaker fee, but it was just covering the very basics, and we relied on the generosity again of those speakers to give their time, and everyone in skating does things for the love, and hopefully we can change that around. But yeah, so that's what part one of the trip. Part two of the trip is that the second part of the year I got some more casual work lined up that I talked about before, and that allowed me to pay everybody back. So everybody that had fundraised me, I paid everybody back, because like money's not ours personally to stare at. Like, money's only useful when it's useful. And in my mind, like, things that this is why I talk about sharing. Like, if you have a skateboard at a park and others don't, like, you should share it with everybody, and everybody has a go to skate. If you're from a community where there's only 5 skateboards and there's 20 kids and everyone wants to hang at the skate park, you just take turns. So I feel it's like the same with, if you can, like, pots of money, like people that had money at the time to share did. And remember, I said if you're a billionaire, share something. And of course, everybody that wasn't a billionaire and probably struggles themselves were just so generous, which is just people's nature, I guess. People are just naturally compassionate and kind.
Sure.
So yeah, same thing. Like, I'm like, okay, well, I've got the money and I'll just pay it back. But the actual house itself, like, we're trying to save money, and it was cool. It was, I think, eight guys, and then Liz and myself. So 2 women that shared this house in San Diego to go to the skate conference at San Diego State Uni.
Yep.
And it was really, really cool. Like, like a lot of the adults, and then there were some people in their 20s and 30s. But again, like, skateboarders can connect really quickly with each other because they have that empathy. And so it was amazing. Like, we, so there was, let me think, Brian Glennie and Paul O'Connor, and then Josh Sutton, who's from the UK, that publishes Res Fez books. So he's got some really cool, great titles with John O'Coot and a whole bunch of other people. And he's got his own book coming out soon, which is going to be awesome. And then there was Liz, who I think she works for Concrete Jungle Foundation, and myself. So sort of two women in their 40s and 50s. I think I was the second oldest. Josh might be older than me, but I was definitely one of the oldest people of the skate house. And then we had Chris Giamarino, Wyatt Cunningham, and Ben Dixon, who are all in their 30s and 20s, and they're recent PhD graduates, or doing their PhD now. Another person that was at the San Diego Skate House was Tom Crickley, and let me saying your last name, Tom properly. And yeah, he's doing amazing research on DIY spaces, and I just wanted to give him a quick shout out as well. It was super cool seeing Tom's work. So mix of generations, but all doing sort of, skate research work. And it was a lot of conversations about different philosophical approaches. Paul writes about skateboarding and religion, so hence that's why I was probably thinking about theological issues. But they had a lot of late night debates about phenomenology, which is a particular style of thinking and being in the world, and philosophy. And it goes way over my head. Like, I'm just like, like, dudes, I just want I want to look at kittens and cats on the internet now. And they would have these as they're like professors and very, like, they're full into their careers and quite advanced in there and quite senior. They were having these deep philosophical conversations. And it was just funny because it was a skate house. So one minute they'd be arguing about the latest cover of Thrasher, and which, beer was the almost awesome. And then they'd be talking about these deep philosophical problems, drawing on, very obscure literature. So it was kind of wild and played with your mind. It's like, you sort of, are you talking about, like the latest Warble video, and at the same time talking about Socrates and Plato from like classical Greek philosophy? That's cool. Like, you be you. And the skate conference itself was a great opportunity to meet, again, really talented skate researchers that don't always, you won't always hear about their work. So Roberto Enriquez talks about Mexican skateboarding scene, for instance. There's like a local skateboarder here, Dan, after tell you later his thesis work, but he studies graffiti at skate parks. And the typologies of the graffiti is really interesting. Like, we all sort of know there's like a whole bunch of graffiti and skate art, but like when you categorize it, it's just really interesting, like the memorial ones. So when one of your homies might pass away, you'll have memorials. You have particular types of messages, and to non-skaters or people outside that community, they can't see the sentimental or the emotional value or the social value of that. But if you send in a whole bunch of people to then, paint over it, it's like, it can be very traumatic, and it's just no point. Like, why would you not let people grieve and have that ritual of acknowledging in a close community somebody of, their member, one of their crew. So just bringing that sort of, skater's eyes and understanding to things that outsiders may not necessarily see, but they might understand more and respect and be more considerate to if they can see it through different eyes. And that's the power of research. It's not to have fancy words and, sort of quote things for the sake of, quoting them. It really is to sort of bring back what it is to be human, what it is to feel, and how to respect each other. And that's the kind of amazing work that, like councils may not necessarily think, oh, we need a study of graffiti and writing and, stuff at skate parks. But once you understand how skate parks, for instance, can be places that bring people together and can be sanctuaries where they don't have a safe house or, that's just their world, it really is important to young people and others to understand what that means to them. So yeah, like stuff like that was just really amazing. And then Dr. Jessica Murphy talked about sport ecology. So again, like sustainability but really sort of in a really nice scientific way with lots of data about how big shoe companies, for instance, or soft drink companies are taking a toll and how they can be more sustainable and, more aware of what they're doing.
Yep.
Because we'll consume anyway, like saying end consumption isn't actually realistic. So we just need to look at ways to minimize and revolutionize what we're doing rather than banning it, because that doesn't necessarily work.
Exactly. Okay, this next question is from Atita Verghese. She said, what is something in skateboarding you have found to be different now than a few years ago when you started? What excites you or doesn't about it?
So I met Atita at Pushing Boaders, and she was one of the panelists talking about amazing things that she does with Girls Skate India, but also just in general about turning skateboarding around and changing a lot of the sort of, behaviours that wasn't always making things inclusive, and just getting us to question, how we relate to the environment as well. She was one of the, sort of leading voices to start talking about that. And then I got to interview her for that Yeah Girl article about, skate and regenerate. And she had such, sort of practical ways that ordinary skateboarders can just go out and start being more caring about the environment, all the way to competition holders and, people that build big stadiums, like maybe some of the things we can be more thoughtful about. So I feel that what's changed from when we first had started talking about the environment at Pushing Boaders together to now is that there's a lot more momentum, a lot more interest behind it. There's been a lot more articles. There's all these collaborative groups popping up. Yeah, there definitely seems to be a more urgent and concentrated effort on how we can become more sustainable in what we do as a subculture and as a, very large sport, really. And, I'm not a particular expert in the science side of the environment, and as a consumer I have a lot of bad habits. I really want, industry, and I want people that build the skate parks and, sort of at the bigger end of things to look at technologies that make it convenient for us as skateboarders just to make the right choices. So, I'm very much keen on just seeing both industry rather than just, ordinary skateboarders making those changes, and how we can all sort of work together on that.
All right, this next question is from Tobias Hubinet, your co-author of the book Adoption and Multiculturalism. He asked, what do you see being the political potential behind skateboarding?
So Professor Hubinet is a adoptee, actually, a Korean adoptee, who I am very grateful for helping me in my earlier days when I wanted to do my PhD. And this is a very important question from somebody like Tobias, because he's a pioneering activist. He's, really changed the way that adoption is looked at from a sort of, decolonizing perspective. And he's done a lot of really great work in giving back dignity and rights and, just having a much more reflective and careful approach around how children from war zones are, moved from one nation to another and one family to another. So I think it's a really important question that he's asked, and I think I answered sort of similar before, talking about when we personalize things too much, we take on the burden of the problems and maybe the oppression or maybe the marginalization that we experience, and we think, what am I doing wrong, or it's my fault, or why me? And all these personalized, individualized questions don't actually look at the root causes in society about what is the problem, whether it's, not being able to, even pay your bills. Like, that's not always an individual sort of blaming situation. We need to look at things like, what is society doing to make jobs fairer? What's the cost of living? And, how is that, being equally distributed? And skateboarding's very much got the potential. And I think that in the book I wrote with Anthony and with Adam's illustrations, we really do look at that political potential behind skateboarding to make us more reflective on power relationships and how to share power. And that will reflect more broadly on how we act in our everyday lives and the people that, interact with us as skateboarders. So around things like racism, thinking about the land that we skate on, as, Douglas Miles Sr., strongly reminds us we're skateboarding on native land. And, to have the subculture that sort of is already rebellious and, not afraid to sort of stand out and do bold things, maybe these changes are really societal and they affect everyone, but as skateboarders we can really push things ahead and advance things in a way that a lot of other, sports might be too fearful of or, it's definitely got potential, and I feel like skateboarding is something that affects a lot of marginalised people. Oh, it doesn't affect, it embraces. What am I saying? Skateboarding is something that is embraced by people on the margins, the outsiders, the misfits, the people that, you know, don't always have power, and for us to realise that the power is within us and that we can make great changes around the environments, the cities, the spaces, the communities that we all skate on. I think that's, you know, very powerful, and I'm really happy that our book got to talk to all those people about their own work in social change and skateboarding and power.
Alright, this next one is from Brian Glennie. So he said, "Hi Indy, beyond all your amazing research, skating, and advocacy, all of which I deeply admire and find inspiring, there's something more to you that I find completely disarming. I can really be my egg-throwing, profanity-spewing self around you without fear of judgment, while also not feeling bad when you ask me to chill out. There's something essentially skater to this part of your personality, call it a disposition or whatever, but I feel almost a poser in comparison. So thank you, and also, what's your secret? How do you make people feel so welcome to be themselves, but also make them feel comfortable when you keep them in check?"
So Professor Brian Glennie is such an amazing, again, he's like the sort of Paul O'Connors and Ian Bourdins of the world. He's very generous, he's incredibly intelligent, but doesn't sort of hold that intelligence in a way that it's weaponized, or that, you know, he uses it to, you know, as a ladder to, you know, climb up above and leave everybody behind. He uses his intelligence to, you know, sort of welcome people and to make us fight the power in a sense, and, you know, be really true to ourselves, but also look at how life can be a battleground and how to sort of be brave and bold and, you know, sort of fight for what we believe in and what we think is right, and just really radically changing things that we take for granted. So Brian's a big thinker, and skateboarding has for a long time said shut up and skate, where, you know, we should take time to listen to each other and talk out our ideas and very much sort of, you know, think about what sorts of philosophies and values we're upholding or that we can change or, you know, embrace as we skate. So I'm a big fan of Brian's academic work and just a huge fan of Brian in general. So that's a very deep question from Brian about, I guess, you know, all of us our need to care for each other, and definitely, you know, the beauty of understanding each other rather than judging each other is such a power and a gift that we all have. And that art of, which we all need to practice, is when we call people in and when do we call people out, and what do we achieve from either tactic or, you know, why would we even do that, and what's the motivation behind doing that. And basically when I don't know if I make people feel comfortable. I feel kind of awkward all the time myself. But I guess, you know, like if we act out of love and care for everyone and sort of humble ourselves to the fact that we can only progress in skateboarding from our errors and learning and modifying and, you know, calibrating what we do to life, you know, like life as a sort of, I guess, you know, another way to look at what we do as trial and error. And, you know, I just really am a flawed person myself, and I have, you know, all the sort of human flaws that everybody does. So I really just feel better and I feel comforted when somebody calls me in to change than when I'm, you know, like when people are cranky and, you know, sort of shut you down, because I guess that has its purpose too, but it doesn't leave you with much room to move or grow and pass that on to somebody else. So if we're all learning together and all we learn is to, you know, sort of shut down and cancel each other, you know, we end up in our own little islands. And it's so much, you know, I just really love that idea of us. When we have a harsh lesson in life or whatever we need to do, even if it's just like a slight modification of how we use a term or whatever it is, you know, I just feel that's something that's a beautiful thing to share. And whatever makes us get more connected to each other and closer is a really wonderful thing. And I spoke to an Indigenous scholar and skater, Seth Westhead, and he gave me this beautiful advice, which is, you know, always connect before you correct. Meaning, you know, that could be like just this whole thing of like, you know, if you see somebody skateboarding, connect with what they're about before you correct their, you know, stance or tell them to pop more or bend their knees or whatever. Like, you might actually find they've had ACL surgery, or you might find that, yeah, like their bodies literally, you know, won't skate the same way as you. Maybe they've only been skating for a week. Maybe they've been skating for years, but they've always had a particular barrier to something that is easy to use. So rather than just going out and correcting them, connect with somebody first and find a bit more about what they're about. And, you know, a lot of the time you'll find somebody's just, you know, warming up, and, you know, having people come over and correct your technique isn't really that helpful. And if anything, it's, you know, it's a bit intrusive or it's just, counterproductive. And so maybe that's the same with how we all, when we're not behaving in ways that, or we find people aren't behaving in ways that we think is going to be cool or chill, we should connect with them first before we, think we have any right or any place to start correcting their behaviours or whatever it is. So understanding rather than judging, and I think just, coming from a place of love and humility is going to help us all. And I think that's what Brian embodies. We just learn so much from people like Brian. So thank you for that question.
All right, this next question is from Natalie Porter of Women Skate History. So she asked, since I'm a librarian, I'd love to know her favorite authors, and that can be academic or just for fun. Cheers, Natalie.
Oh my gosh, that's such a great question. I love librarians and I love Natalie Porter and I love women's skate history. It's such a beautiful project and she has such a beautiful soul, and you can just tell the way that she writes about the women from history that she showcases in her Instagram and on her website. What a, uniquely kind and inquisitive person she is, and that she does so much out of the pure love of, elevating people and understanding them. And, I don't think she makes a lot of money from it, like she's doing it for love like the rest of us. So there's so much to admire about everybody that, has sort of come to ask questions. And I think in terms of books, actually, one of my favourite books is The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. And, I guess it's, about like a family with the lead character's an orphan and, they're outsiders, they're obviously not accepted and people are judging the book by its cover without knowing them, and they sort of make their own, family through their gang, and they're tough but they're wholesome all at once. And, Ponyboy, the lead character, is a dreamer, and the fact that it was written bits and pieces by S.E. Hinton's own readings, I guess, and, she used that sort of, I guess, nom de plume, I don't know what you'd call it, but, not many people knew for a long time that, S.E. Hinton was a woman or a girl when she wrote it, so she sort of understood as well, like, trying to take a voice, you have barriers for your gender when you're young, where you just want to write and not be judged by labels or, whatever, or that you're more than, whatever people say your gender is. Like, it was a really cool book when I was growing up. I still love The Outsiders even now, and obviously, there are different aspects for contemporary identities and everything that we're taken to account now as well, but for its time, I really enjoyed that book, and it's just dreamy. In terms of non-fiction books, I definitely like Franchise by Marsha Chatelain. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right. It's Chatelain, so maybe it's Chatelain. But Marsha Chatelain's Franchise about McDonald's and the history of Black Americans and fast food chains is a beautiful, clever history. It's got a lot of political conscience. It speaks a lot about, stereotypes and inequity and so on. It's a very great book by a great historian that I'm so sort of fortunate to read that work. And again, I just think I was just found out about the idea of it on Twitter, and I hadn't met her, and she said that she would send me a copy of the book, and she did, and I really treasure that as well, because, you've got this smart, clever, socially, aware historian author that's just kind to some, essentially all she knew was some, skateboarder from Australia that thought her book sounded cool. So, yeah, such kindness in the world. I love it, and it makes the world go round.
Okay, this next one is from Jeffrey Campbell. So he asked, so years ago, I got tagged in this by @ThatCatSkateboarding on Instagram with a scene taken from my video Seki Presh from 2011. Indigo just alerted me the other day that was actually her that did this series. After messaging her, listening to her on the Mostly Skateboarding podcast and following her Instagram, she obviously has a mature, fair, and probably law-abiding approach to skating. Therefore, I found it interesting she was compelled to draw this scene of us wrestling for a board back off a security guard at a spot inside a building's foyer, where you are definitely not supposed to be. In short, where does she stand on street skating and the sort of illegal aspect of it and the culture behind that?
Such a great question, Jeff Campbell, thank you for that question. And I probably just look more, law-abiding than I actually am. I don't know, maybe it's my pigtails or just that, I'm little or something. I like pink. But I'm actually on the radical side of, thinking about what's legal and what not's legal, and sort of decriminalizing things is my jam. I definitely don't believe in calling law enforcement to the majority of situations. I think that it should be back in community power, regardless of the sort of I guess the ways that Asians can be accepted or not accepted in society. I have a dark skin colour. I'm not white, and I have friends that are from various ethnicities, friends who are First Nations, and I've definitely just been out walking down the street and had the authorities pull over and harass us, or sitting on the train and being asked for my ID. So basically being racially profiled and seeing my friends racially profiled by authorities growing up. Having security follow me around when I was younger, and Vietnamese weren't seen as gentle, lovely people. We were seen as gang members in the past. So yeah, I guess I think that young people especially need to but be part of the city and have fun and reimagine what the city landscape is possible, what's possible. I'm very much into street skating. I spend most of my time wanting to street skate and not actually go to skate parks, because it's a very sort of sanitized, contained area, and it doesn't allow you for the creativity that you can have street skating, let alone the sort of, social expectations and dynamics of a skate park haven't always been that healthy. Whereas in the street, it's up to you to determine how you want to use an obstacle. There's no right or wrong way in the sense to use a spot in the street. And, I don't drive, so I spend the majority of my time on public transport. I don't hide away in my car from society. I'm always kind of, at a bus stop waiting with the public, or like on a train with the public, and, I am the public. And, you're kind of just mixing with people all the time as a skateboarder on the street. So I think a lot of things that are illegal are just labelled as such, and that we should always challenge that. And we should definitely find ways to work with the architecture of the city, so not necessarily destroy people's property that they, paid a lot for and they love, but finding ways to modify architecture so that it's win-win for everybody. So that skateboarders get to skate it, young people get to use it, or various sports, roller skaters, whatever, parkour, I don't know. Everybody gets to make the city come alive. And Seki Press was just cool, it's a cool video. I'm a skateboarder. When I see videos with security, throwing out skateboarders, you always know there's a better way, and that, the security guard's not paid that much to protect property that they don't even get to enjoy probably, or anything. So, yeah. I think that security definitely is, it's an unnecessary force against skateboarders, and I feel for average person that has to, take a job as security, and, I don't think it's fair to be disrespectful to, like, the working men, women, and, working non-binary people that take on security jobs. But definitely I'm all for decriminalisation, using the city as a more creative space, and, don't be like a dick in a uniform picking on kids having fun with skateboards is my philosophy. And yeah, it was just a cool video, a cool scene, and I thought it'd just be fun, at the time to paint that within my art project that I was doing, which was just for fun. And it raised money for men's mental health as well, so it was just, apart from just using art for fun, got to give back to people and communities that have done a lot for mine and my friends.
Alright, this next one is from Jenny Hagen Wills. I hope I'm saying her name right. Your other co-author of the book Adoption and Multiculturalism. So she asked, skating, like writing, seems to be about practice, tenacity, and community. What have you taken from your skateboarding world and applied to your life as a writer/scholar, and vice versa, if anything?
I think I talked about a little bit about this before, but it definitely, all those things that the amazing Professor Wills highlights. So she's an adoption scholar that I co-edited a book with, along with Tobias Hubernet. So she's right, like practice, tenacity, and a sense of community are things that we just carry forth through our life if we're lucky enough to have the chance to see the value of such things, whether it's skateboarding, whether it's writing about your own community, adoptees or migrants or refugees or just your homies or, your family. I think it's just seeing where there's an issue or a problem that could be addressed and more understood about how things can work, how things can be more fair and harmonious, and how things can be a lot stronger or more creative. And yeah, just persisting till you roll away till you've got the make is a good philosophy to take in between those worlds of skating and other things.
Okay, this next one is an audio one.
Hi Indy, very excited to hear your episode when it comes out. My question is, you've been so instrumental in bringing so many things into the forefront of the conversation within skateboarding and elevating so many people's voices. But I wondered at this stage, what do you feel is the thing that's still being unsaid? Like, what is it that we're not talking about? And if you don't have an answer for that, my question would be, why are you so rad?
It's a really cute question at the end. Why are you so rad, Harry? Like, oh my gosh, we're just surrounded by people that are rad. We're just lucky, I guess. We're just, and skateboarding is a really interesting place to find radness. So that's a really surprising and very nice question at the end from Harry. And maybe something that we're not talking about in skateboarding enough is just how to embrace care in a way that is more prominent, whether it's caring about the consequences of what we do when we skate somewhere and it has an impact on the earth, or when it creates harm, I guess. So, that motto, I think maybe it's for doctors or something, like do no harm. Like, if as skateboarders we could be like that, that's something that we could talk about more. And also when I say care, I mean like in industry, like caring for skateboarders when they're injured, or caring for them when they aren't always able to, I don't know, maybe for mental health reasons or whatever, where they need time out. Like a lot of other professions and jobs, maybe you get sick leave, maybe you get holiday pay, maybe you get, all sorts of resources to help you through tougher times. And I know skateboarding companies aren't rich or anything, but, well, some of them very much are. So I just think finding ways to create care plans for skaters to skaters when we're hurt, when we're injured, or when we do harm to ourselves or others, like kind of just coming up with some, low-cost strategies to proper ones where we are talking about multinational companies that could have a source, a range of support services and, hospital cover or something, because that should become part of society. We shouldn't just rely on individual companies to do that for us. That should be something that everyone should have access to. But, thinking about ways to take care of each other in a much more broader sense and a much more sustainable sense would be something I would love to hear more conversations about.
Okay, I have just a few last ones. This next one is another audio one.
Hi, Indy. I hope you are very well, and great that you're speaking with Quentin. Got a little question for you, and I ask this as someone who is also, like yourself, very deeply embedded in academia, and it's a question that a critical question that I ask myself a lot, which is about what academia can do for skateboarding, because it feels like skateboarding offers a lot to academia and that there's a lot we can take from skateboarding. I wonder what you think are the benefits that are flowing back into skateboarding from academia. I hope you're well and look forward to hearing your response. Lots of love.
Okay, so that was a question from Dr. Danny Abuara, who I'm a huge fan of, and I'm just always so impressed and touched and moved by Danny's creative performance-based work in skateboarding, and her recent project on skate allyship was creating, like soundscapes and hearing how skateboarders experience the skate environment. She's a genius, but she's also very accessible kind of scholar, and the type of work and projects that she does always has an impact back in communities. So no wonder she's also asking these deeper questions of all of us in a critical sense. So the question was, skateboarding gets a lot from academia, but what does academia give back to skateboarding? And it's such a great question, and it won't always. It's not always win-win, and we're always in power relations, which, the book with Anthony that we wrote with the 42 Changemakers was trying to pinpoint, like, we need to share power rather than one person, having all the power or having the authority or the last say. And something I guess that skateboarding needs to be more humble about is its own relationships to power and how it can, gatekeep and all those things. But on the other hand, skateboarding can gain a whole lot of different tools for understanding each other from not from academia per se, but like some of the social research methods, for instance, the art of, sitting down and talking to people and getting their opinions and doing surveys. Like, a lot of the time it makes visible or makes prominent issues that might have been either ignored or, they just seem too hard to deal with. And I think that there are a lot of researchers doing amazing work in the area of mental health, doing amazing work in the area of sexual violence prevention, even like historians sort of, finding these lost histories of youth cultures going out there, like Dr. Christine Feldman Barrett's work, for instance, and just sort of studying cross-cultural conversations and trying to thread together common themes that, we can all relate to and be helpful to us. Like, academics, they do a lot of training and spending a lot of time trying to understand and to take common themes that people have and sort of, again, moving away from what's like a personal trouble and making it looking how it's like a public issue and how society is very much at the cause or, is very partly responsible or greatly responsible, if not wholly responsible, for a lot of the issues that people face. So I think the bridging work between academia and other community ways of finding out about each other and caring for each other is the best way forward and having that sort of reciprocal relationship. So yeah. And also just that, I don't know, having like a home for people that think a lot. You know, a lot of skateboarders probably overthink, or, you know, they're very thoughtful and they're not allowed to be necessarily in normal circumstances, or ordinary sort of, you know, occupations might just, you know, want you to think a lot faster. But like with academia and a lot of the studies, like it's perfect for skateboarders because they really concentrate on things. They're very obsessive. They think things through a lot. They're very creative. And, you know, being able to study and write about that and create, you know, concepts and theories about, you know, ways that we can all improve what we're doing or why we love it. It's kind of beautiful in some ways. So I would encourage a lot more open doors between academia and the community, and, you know, sort of looking at ways that they can have a reciprocal relationship.
All right, there's just 2 left. Let's do this one.
Hi, Dr. Willing. It's Templeton from the Mostly Skateboarding podcast. My question is, what's one thing from academia that you'd like to see ported over to skateboarding, and what's one thing from skateboarding you'd like to see ported over to academia? Thanks. Looking forward to hearing the interview.
Okay, so great question. Again, I think it was kind of answered the way that I was thinking around what Dr. Abuara asked as well. It's like, what can, you know, we take from skateboarding and life, and what's the exchange, and what are the bridges or ways that they complement each other? It's such a great question. And, you know, Templeton's like a natural sociologist. I don't think he is by his studying or anything, maybe he is, but through his podcast, and in fact all the mostly skateboarding team are sort of natural born sociologists. They ask a lot of questions about how things work, and, you know, why so, and the who, what, how, you know, how, why questions, and then put it all together and think, well, this is rad, or, you know, this needs more improvement, or, you know, we made mistakes here, but look, you know, this is where we made progress. And I think that whole sort of analytical thinking and critical thinking, and also constructive thinking that goes together between skateboarders and maybe researchers, or skateboarders that are researchers, and, you know, skateboarders that aren't researchers, these conversations about how things work and how do we progress and how does change happen are, you know, sort of my passion. And I think that asking those questions of each other, regardless of our occupation, are going to be really important. And also just valuing ideas. You know, we're at a time where maybe there is a lot of simple thinking and people want easy answers, and sometimes that's not the way it is. It's, you know, it's complicated, it's complex, it could be beautifully complex. So we, you know, need to value and give time to thinking things through, taking a pause, testing things out, you know, maybe making mistakes, trial and error, experimenting if something works or doesn't, getting feedback, you know, learning from multiple voices about, or multiple perspectives and experiences, you know, what's going to make this scene awesome or more awesome, or what isn't making it awesome, so how do we change that? So yeah, I feel like just asking deeper questions, critical thinking, and having time and valuing time to think is really, really a gift that we can all give each other, I guess. And, you know, skateboarding, of course, like, I love it. So it's just a really great place to have a lens on the world. So yeah, that's a really great question from the wonderful Mostly Skateboarding host and team member, Templeton. Thank you.
I just wanted to share this last one from Anthony Pappalardo, your co-author. So he said, ask Indigo about her eclectic musical tastes and to pick 3 songs that inspire her / give some insight on her broad range of taste.
See, Anthony's so naturally cool. I feel like I can't necessarily respond to this in a way that I would love to, given Anthony's musical knowledge is great, and he's written 2 books about alternative subcultural music, and I think he was in a band is in bands himself, so he knows his music, and that was one of the great things, again, about working, you know, with people that are so different from you. You'd sort of learn different sides of something that you thought you knew about, like skateboarding and the music culture. And I think everybody has really eclectic taste in music. I think we're in an era with Spotify or like whatever, you know, sort of cloud music that you might use. You don't have to save up to buy 1 album a year. You'll listen to a whole lot of music in a day or a week. it's really embarrassing what I skateboard to. I skateboard to classical music on my earbuds. So I put one earbud in one ear and only in one ear so that I always have one ear that I can hear skaters, so I can hear all the wheels and, I'm not going to snake anybody or anything, but I do like listening to music, so I kind of listen to music in one, and I listen to classical music when I skate.
Wow. Like
really, really ridiculous musicals. So
okay.
I'll skateboard to West Side Story or
oh really? Wow, cool.
or like the Nutcracker, like just ridiculous music that you think, okay, like what's wrong with me? And I'm a huge film fan, so like I kind of skate to like Blue Danube because it's in 2001 and it just reminds me of like being in a spacecraft or something silly. Yeah, so classical music is a weird one, and then of course if somebody says, what are you listening to? I'll change my music, say, I'm listening to something really cool probably, like not like a big nerd. And I think it's really important to acknowledge actually the power of classical music, because most people got some posh stuff that is inaccessible, but if you think of any film you've watched as a child or most TV shows, it relies on classical music.
Yes.
To capture your attention and make it your memories, from Star Wars to Disney films to, probably even Pineapple Express probably has some sort of orchestral, like Point Break probably, I don't know. So yeah, like classical music actually taps into, I think, a deep part of our, psyche or emotions that is very endearing and nostalgic and very comforting at times. So probably, like my favorite piece of classical music would be the Emperor Concerto by Beethoven, which sounds again I sound like a bit of a weirdo. And the reason that I started listening to that is really funny. Like I met this bikie from like a proper bikie gang. He looked really rough. And he said, we were just talking about music, and it's like, you got to listen to like Emperor's Concerto. It's the one from Picnic at Hanging Rock, which was like an Australian movie that was kind of famous in the past. And I was thinking, give it a shot. And yeah, it's a very beautiful piece of music from some weird Australian film. Yeah, and there was like a bikie that suggested it, because we're actually talking about like a bikie movie called Stone, which is a classic here, and it's really funny. And then talking about Picnic at Hanging Rock, and then like that piece of music that's really memorable. So yeah, you can't judge a book by its cover either. Like you'll see some sort of leather jacket wearing dude covered in tattoos, but like you'll listen to this piece of music and be in tears.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I love all the John Williams music. Like he's the composer for a lot of the films that we definitely, people of a certain age, grew up to, but even now, he's a composer of. So I kind of like that escapism, and then I really love Echo and the Bunnymen's songs, because that's sort of, I don't know, like 80s alternative music. So that sort of genre, it's maybe a lot of Brit indie music. I guess I grew up kind of listening to, and I guess maybe if I was trying to think about one last piece of music, I really love Public Enemy.
Oh yeah.
Again, it's just really evocative, motivating, powerful, and again, sort of, it's like both a call out and a call in. It's like to think about different things that we might have taken for granted, like, Elvis Presley, what does he mean? And, they sort of call that out and say, try and think about what Elvis Presley represented in terms of, the history of, African American and black, musicians, and where he was sort of, being, I guess, sort of used in a way that a commercial way, because he's, more palatable to a commercial wide audience and so on. So, all sorts of, interesting questions about the intersections between race and society, and of course, Public Enemy are just, really great to listen to as well.
Sure.
There's my three pieces, and I still feel, I would just love to know at least 100 picks that Anthony Pappalardo would choose. Thank you for those questions, they were fun.
No, my pleasure, and thank you so much, Indigo, I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Clinton.
That's it for my conversation with Indigo. Follow her on Instagram @GoodWillingHunting and on Twitter @IndigoWilling. Support the Consent is Rad campaign and follow their Instagram account @consent_is_rad. Also, do yourself a favor by picking up a physical or digital copy of her latest book, Skateboarding, Power and Change, co-written with Anthony Pappalardo. Thank you for tuning in. See you soon for a new episode of Beyond Boards.